Chapter 28 The Doorways. Wang finally found the doorway. This sword essence appeared to look like snow, but he managed to faintly see countless smaller sword essences. These tiny icicle-like sword essences were enormous in number, and were densely packed together, moving in layers. Each tiny sword essence was like a drop of water. And countless drops of water created the ocean, the movements the tide. Xianxia's sword essence was like a little tide, a little icicle tide. For the first time, he forgot the pain from his injured mind. The scene he had just seen was extremely short, but what he had seen was enough for him to think for a long time. Dazzling tiny sword essences like ice crystals, moving like the tide. In the vastness and danger was a certain kind of beauty. Even if it was someone like him that didn't understand the sword, he couldn't help but sigh in amazement. He suddenly realized that the snow dragon that Xianxia had released wasn't a real one. It was also constructed out of countless snow-white thin sword essences. Dazedly standing in the yard, mind enthralled until deep into the night. Early morning on the second day, Wang ran over to Cold Mist Valley. Changing from temporary worker to official worker, and adding on a Zhuji Dan, for the money-grubbing zombie, it hit the key points and he put more care in. He was clear on the goal that he wanted to find answers, but he deeply understood the matter had to be done step by step, especially when it came to the kind of outer sect disciples like him that had nothing. Compared to before, his workload was much greater now. Fourth Shirgu had given him a jade stick. Inside were all the points that needed to be attended to for all kinds of ling herbs. About 90% of it were things that he had never known before. For him, it was a completely new challenge. But luckily he could slowly explore. The ling herbs in the medicine fields looked to be in great condition at the moment. In the corner of the medicine fields, the fire dragon grass had already sprouted. The seed from the fire dragon grass that Wuxia and Xianxia had given him had been planted. Today, he needed to accompany the female disciples to Dongfu. It was called accompaniment, but truthfully, it was more like protection. Sitting on the flying paper crane, Wang followed about 30 meters behind the female disciples. This group of women were really chatty. The sounds of their chatter could be heard from far away. Hearing it, Wang felt irritated. After being fixed and improved, the flying crane was much steadier and comfortable. He thought silently that the 3 pieces of jingsher that he paid was really worth it. Sitting on the paper crane with nothing to do, he started to once again examine Xianxia's sword essence. Even though he wanted to die each time, but he knew very well how valuable this experience was. A chance to learn from Xianxia, other than Wuxia and Xianxia, for an outer sect disciple like him, he didn't even need to think about it. He didn't know why Puyao would keep Shishu's sword essence, but for Wang, this sword essence was undoubtedly a treasure trove. It wasn't likely for him to learn all of it. But just learning a little was enough for him to reap endless benefits. Just at this time, a clamor came from the front, startling Wang from his musings. His heart instantly wasn't happy. Several unfamiliar male shouja seemed to be in a tangle with his sect's female disciples. Wang sighed. These days, it wasn't easy to accept gifts. Taking down the paper crane, he slowly walked forward. This was the main path to Dongfu. Wang wasn't afraid that the other would really do something too outrageous, so he was extremely confident. Heard that your Liang Feng Shiji went into Zhuji. Good news, good news. The male shouja in the front said in a smooth tone. The other male shouja in the surroundings laughed. At this time, a male shouja fawningly said, Xixiang, I wasn't wrong, the level of these women, they are much tender than the shrews in our sect. True, true. The leader smiled nefariously, warning, but be careful, if they head what you said, you'll have a good time. Haha, of course. Wang lightly coughed. The female disciples instantly created a path. Since he had accepted the things, he couldn't really just stand by. What is this? Eerie one. Blocking the road for looks. Suemo walked out of the crowd, stealing a look at the other, smiling coldly. This group of people looked like the dregs at a glance, each of them with the head of a deer and the eyes of a mouse. Especially the leader. Looking at that face, Suemo had the impulse to raise his fists and beat him into a bun. Compared to the others in the sect, Suemo's experience on the outside was much richer, his eyes could be said to be shrewd. This group looked just like the kind that wasn't mainstream. To deal with this kind of people, the more polite, the more they felt that you were soft and easy to bully. In reality, the biggest weapon that Suemo relied on was the golden sword ring on his hand. There were 3 sword energies stored inside. To use it to scare people was pretty good. So it was a change of owners. The leader smirked, examining Suemo, the disdain on his face evident, just Lianqi 8th level and dare to try to be the hero. Really doesn't know your own abilities. Even if Liang Feng is here, she wouldn't dare talk like this. Did this person really have a strong background? Suemo's heart was uncertain, but he didn't show it on his face, such boasting. With such abilities, why don't you go to our sex gate to shout? Running here to bully girls, TSK, really strong, really strong. The female disciples in the surroundings covered their mouths and laughed. The person's face became ugly. He snorted, heard that Wukong sword sect had a genius. Is it such trash like you? Xixiang today will let you know what is manners. His voice landed and a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of him. Suemo instantly was stupefied. The other actually had a flying sword. The first word in his mind was Zhuji. He hadn't thought that this mouse-like person was actually Zhuji. Those with only Lianqi cultivation could not imprint on flying swords. Even Wei Xiang, before he entered Zhuji, he had never had a flying sword. Incredibly nervous as he stared at the flying sword floating in front of the other, Suemo swallowed tightly. This was the first time he saw a flying sword. Entirely green, about 3 feet, body narrow, edge sharp, the light gleaming. If the blow landed, a bloody hole would certainly be a result. The expressions of the female disciples also changed dramatically. They hadn't thought that they would encounter a Zhuji Xiuzha this time. They had originally been full of confidence for Suemo, but it instantly evaporated. There was a large chasm between Lianqi and Zhuji. To have a Lianqi face a Zhuji, there wasn't any room at all for resistance. The power of the flying sword wasn't something that a sword energy could contend against. Xiaoguo's apple-like face was pale in fright, terrified as she looked at the flying sword. The person laughed darkly, "Let's get you to have a good taste of Ye's green-point sword." At the same time, his fingers fused together as they swept through the air. It was as though the flying sword was intelligent as it suddenly sliced towards Suemo. The instant the other's flying sword moved, Suemo calmed down. All the nervousness seemed to have disappeared. He stared straight at the flying sword just like how, in these past days, he waited for that snow-white sword essence. The flying sword moved, and his heart instantly became serene. The green flying sword might have looked scary, but this guy's power was limited and the feeling of danger that it gave him was far below that pure sword essence from Xian Yen Shishu. Only a beautiful surface. The sword essence was flimsy and insubstantial. It actually wasn't condensed into form, simply just unbearable to look at. The Ling energy in his body revolving quickly, he calmly looked at the flying sword speeding closer. In a flash, his fused fingers lifted up and pointed into space. A gold sword energy ripped out of his hands. Ping! A crisp sound, the sword energy accurately hitting a spot 3 centimeters behind the sword point. The flying sword shook slightly. Humph! The other snorted. The Ling energy revolved and the flying sword turned in midair, creating a half circle of light in the air, extremely beautiful. Ping! A sound of metal crashing suddenly sounded. The flying sword suddenly stopped, the half circle of light dissolving. It was like a dancing goddess right at the climax when she suddenly sneezed. All the beauty and elegance instantly disappeared. The other was shocked and angry. He could see the person in front of him was relying on a talisman. However, being interrupted 2 times by the other, and the other was still unharmed, he felt it a blight on his reputation. Facing a Lianqi disciple, and 2 of his moves were ineffective. If this passed into the sect, his Shixiang would laugh. The previous 2 moves had only been with the intentions of teaching a lesson, but now, he didn't care that much and furiously revolved his Ling energy. The worst that could happen was being punished after getting back. Gathering the Ling energy, the power of the flying sword was drastically different. The flying sword flew on top of Zhuomo's head, a skin of faint sword energy appearing on the sword, emitting a whining sound like an excited animal preparing to leap at its prey. Zhuomo raised his head. Shining in his narrowed eyes was a hint of excitement and craziness. Hitting the target 2 times in a row greatly increased his confidence. He had no experience fighting against anyone else previously. Last time with Li Yingfeng Shiji, it had only been 1 move. And facing Xian Xianxia's sword essence in his sea of consciousness, he didn't even have the power to resist. Not just resist, in front of the vast sword essence, he couldn't even manage to raise a finger. But facing the flying sword here, he had successfully blocked the other's 2 attacks. Just this kind of battle success, it was enough for him to be proud. But at this time, he was completely caught up in a kind of strange excitement and zealotry. He suddenly had an insane idea. Break this flying sword. He didn't know why he would suddenly have such a crazy idea, but this idea was extremely intense once it appeared, so intense that he didn't go to even think if it was realistic. The time wasn't enough for him to think. Under the persuasions of this crazy idea, he also gathered up the Ling energy in his body. Narrowing his eyes, he closely followed the green flying sword above his head. Scenes passed in front of his eyes. The pure, concentrated, vast and dangerous sword essence of Xian Xianxia, as though it was a tide of icicles, seemed to be even clearer in front of his eyes. It was like a great entity, slowly moving, and that feeling of cold didn't lessen in the least. Every bit of pain when his consciousness was cleaved seemed to become abnormally clear at this time. He didn't know if it was the stimulation from the pain, but his consciousness was extremely clear, as though everything in the surroundings had calmed. The Ling energy in his body swelled and rushed towards the golden sword ring. He raised his right hand, his fingers fused together as they pointed at the air. Chapter 29 Sword Essence. Has Shixiang heard of Wukong Sword Sect? 2 people were on the mountain, each riding on a green bull. The 2 green bulls were entirely dark green, their hair smooth, the horns on their foreheads pure black, their manner leisurely as they slowly traveled. It was extremely steady, the 2 people on their backs as though they were statues, not moving a sliver. With such a ruckus made recently, it would be hard to not have heard. The older man was called Xiang, a disciple in Qi Sword Sect. The other was his shidi, Liang Luo. Qi Sword Sect was slightly famous in the region of Dongfu. The 2's innate talents were exceptional. Even though they were limited by their age, but they had power and a reputation. Yeah, it's all so unusual and mysterious, I don't really believe it. Liang Luo said as he shook his head. Xiang glanced at his shidi, laughing inside. Everything about shidi was good except that he was too proud. But he could understand. Shidi was 10 complete years younger than him, yet their cultivations were almost the same. If Shidi was in a big sect, he most likely would have limitless potential. The sword energy that night, I saw as well. It really was an apparition. He mused, to be able to cause an apparition in the world, this person's comprehension of the sword is astounding. Liang Luo was unconvinced. Pity we can't encounter him and then have a good practice bout, wouldn't that be a great thing? I have never heard of this Wukong sword sect before, I wonder what great luck they ran into. Xiang said with a mirthless smile, Wukong sword sect was only low-key these past years. For Jindan masters at the back. In all of Dongfu, it definitely is enough to enter the top ranks. For Jindan masters. Liang Luo was dumbstruck and couldn't believe it. Xixiao, are you sure? Our sect only has 3 Jindan masters. That Wukong sword sect can have 4. Yes. The smile left Xixiang, his heart heavy. The division of power in Dongfu's surroundings had been at equilibrium a long time ago. Such a strong sect suddenly appearing, it would definitely affect this kind of equilibrium. Additionally, Wukong's sword sect had been biding their time, people couldn't help but think more. In the 4, the most powerful is Elder Xian Yen. If it wasn't Elder Tian Songji that exposed his identity, who would have thought the honored, Ice Dragon Sword, was in our Dongfu? There's now one more strong entity in Dongfu. Liang Luo couldn't help ask, this Ice Dragon Sword is well known? Xixiang smiled, replying, I had never heard it before, but according to the elders, he has some notoriety. He became known in the Yao hunt, his death kill is very high. In the past, there were countless Yaomua that died under his sword. Liang Luo inhaled sharply. To be able to survive Yao hunt, then he was already not a simple character. And to gain a reputation in Yao hunt, it definitely meant the other was a strong one. He knew this kind of common knowledge. Just at this time, the two suddenly raised their heads, looking forward. Such strong sword essence. Liang Luo's expression changed and urged the green bull under him. The warm and slow green bull became a blur and then he disappeared. Xixiang was also slightly shocked. He hurriedly pushed the green bull and vanished. Zuemo felt the right hand that was wearing the golden sword ring was 30,000 caddies heavy. Raising 1 inch would use up all the energy in the body. All the Ling energy inside was like a wild stallion off the ropes, uncontrollably and crazily flooding towards the golden sword ring on his right hand. His consciousness sunk into a strange kind of void and serenity. The dancing flames in his sea of consciousness froze, as though under a body paralysis spell, frozen and quiet. In the sky of his consciousness, that star suddenly released a blinding light as it slowly revolved. Sitting on the gravestone, Pu raised his head. Looking at the shining star above his head, he laughed soundlessly. Zuemo had never felt his mind so clear. Everything seemed to be under his control. He just knew that he needed to quickly send out this sword energy, otherwise the sword energy was very likely that it would explode in his body and he would become a mess of blood and flesh. He also knew that on the other's flying sword, with its uneven sword energy, he could find at least 7 holes. Yes, he couldn't find any other descriptor. Holes, this label, he felt it was just appropriate. It was much a wondrous feeling. He was drowning in enjoyment. Yet in the eyes of Xiaoguo and the others, at this time Xixiang seemed to be a sword exuding coldness. Every gaze that met his eyes felt their hearts shake. The usually warm and peaceful black pupils were entirely gray-white, indifferent and empty, like a borderless tundra. Even Liang Luo and Xixiang who just managed to arrive were shocked. Liang Luo couldn't control his exclamation, "Whoa!" Xixiang was a much steadier person and saw in more detail. But when he found the other just had a cultivation of Lianqi 8th level, his expression couldn't help change slightly. The flying sword, shrouded in a green light, turned into a stream of light and howled as it shot at Zuemo. Just at this time, Zuemo's slow-moving right hand finally pointed. Hiss! It was like a strange beast baring its teeth. The two noises made by the energies ripping through air were dissonant and entirely different. The temperature in the surroundings plummeted. A white frosted sword energy leapt from Zuemo's fingertips. Ping! 2 streams of light, one green, one white, furiously slammed together. There wasn't the imagined explosion. The white sword energy that Zuemo released seemed like a patch of mist, hitting the other's flying sword. The other's flying sword froze, paralyzed in midair. That person's expression changed drastically. Ding! The flying sword landed on the ground, unmoving like a dead fish. The weakness due to all the strength in the body being pulled out caused his consciousness to blank. That strange feeling was like the tide as it quickly retreated. But before that, he managed to make out his ice frost sword energy had accurately hit the flying sword in a spot near the back. That was the most serious hole that Suemo had found before. He instinctively chose it as his target of attack. It was a pity that he hadn't broken it. Suemo was regretful, but his mind swirled and he fainted on the ground. The female disciples behind him instantly screamed in fear. That disciple whose expression changed ran over to pick up his flying sword. When he saw the body was full of cracks, he instantly became angry and sad. When he looked at Suemo on the ground, hatred rose up in his head. He couldn't help roaring at his other fellow disciples, "You group of trash, what are you standing there for? Chop up this damned guy for me." The other disciples murmured but didn't dare to go up. Suemo's bravery just now had deeply shocked them. And they weren't dumb. From the looks of it, this incident would get big. Jumping out at this time, wasn't it seeking death? The sect elders were too lazy to care about the little incidents that occurred every day, but if they really wounded someone else, and the others' elders went to the mountain, then they wouldn't be well. Seeing his friends not willing, the leader didn't waste words. His face was twisted as he held up the flying sword and walked toward Suemo. Xiaogua sobbed as she leapt over Suemo's body. Her small apple face was full of fear, but she still kept Xixiang behind her. The other female disciples saw the circumstances, exchanged a look and gritted their teeth as they stood up. "What do you want? In this daytime, you dare commit a crime? I'm telling you, I've endured you guys for a long time. Come on, chop me up. If we don't find your elders this time to discuss everything, I'm telling you, I'm not a woman." It might have been they got into the swing of things, but as one added a sentence here and another there, the vigor of the female disciples increased. Watching from far away, Liang Luo also found the clue. He said in shock, "He really just has Lianqi 8th level in cultivation. How can he have such a pure sword essence? There are so many geniuses in this world." Xiang couldn't resist sighing, "Just Lianqi in having such pure sword essence, his potential is limitless. And it was originally a gold sword energy, but it could transform into such an icy sword energy. Whose sect has such a disciple?" Liang Luo was still staring in disbelief at Suemo lying on the ground. Even now, he still couldn't believe a Lianqi disciple could have such a pure sword essence. For a sword shio, the most important and the hardest to practice was sword essence. In the beginning, what they learned was all kinds of sword scriptures. After enduring countless battles and training, they would gradually comprehend sword essence. Sword essence was unable to be described in language. It depended on each individual to comprehend. Sword shio that comprehended a sword essence were the only kind of real sword cultivators. Even if they didn't have a flying sword, they still were sharp and unstoppable. Sword scripture as a model, Ling energy as the connection, but the true quintessence was sword essence. Both of them had a cultivation of Ningmai, and had only just entered the doorway to sword essence. Suddenly seeing a Lianqi disciple having such pure sword essence, how could they not be shocked? Holding the cracked flying sword, listening to the curses of Wukong's sword sect's female disciples, the person's face turned black and then white, harshly yelling, "All of you, get out of my way." Ah! The female disciples that had just been aggressive instantly screamed and scattered in fear. Only Xiaoguo remained as she cried and unwaveringly protected Suemo. That person held the flying sword, a face full of viciousness as he shouted at Xiaoguo, "Get out of the way." Xiaoguo whined as she protected Suem, furiously shaking her head. "You bitch!" The other was enraged. Lifting the sword, he made to slice, frightening Xiaoguo to close her eyes. Bang! Without a warning, the person suddenly seemed to have been hit by a large hammer. His entire body flew out 5 yards and didn't move. Committing a crime publicly in broad daylight, which sect are you from? A calm voice suddenly sounded from behind Xiaoguo. Two Xiuzhe slowly came over, riding on green bulls. The one who spoke was Xiang. With one move, Xiang had intimidated everyone. Even the most idiotic person knew that the other's power was several levels higher. Fear came onto everyone's faces but no one spoke. Xiang heavily humped in dissatisfaction, didn't you hear me speak? At this time, a Xiuzhe trembled as he came out. He gave a bow, responding, we are the disciples from Dong Qi Sword Sect. Offending elder, sorry. Dong Qi Sword Sect. Xiang and Liang Luo exchanged a look, and imperceptibly furrowed their brows. Xiang sneered, at what time Dong Qi Sword Sect was able to freely harass the female disciples of other sects? I should go ask Zhua Mei Tian, is this how he teaches the disciples? The name Zhua Mei Tian instantly caused everyone's expressions to change drastically, turning into terror. Leave. If you do this again, don't blame me for not being courteous. Xiang waved his sleeve and ordered for them to leave. The disciples of Dong Qi Sword Sect hurriedly took their Xixiang and ran frantically as they left. Turning his face, Xiang looked at the crowd of female disciples. In a warm voice, he said, don't worry, this little brother is only suffering from exhaustion of Ling energy, nothing major. Which sect are you from? Chapter 30 Schemes, Greetings to both elders. We are disciples of Wukong Sword Sect. A sensible female disciple hurried answered. The other's cultivation was astounding, and he had helped them out of trouble. He shouldn't have any enmity. Wukong Sword Sect. Xiang and Liang Rong's expressions instantly became strange. They hadn't thought that right after discussing someone else's sect, they actually saved the disciples of that sect and it was a whole crowd. The two's gazes uncontrollably landed on Zhua Mo's body. This little brother is... Xiang tried to make his expression seem normal. In reality, his expression was still strange. This disciple lying on the ground only had a cultivation of Lianqi 8th level and naturally could not be Wei Sheng. When did Wukong Sword Sect produce another genius? Xiang was full of surprise. He had personally seen the apparition when Wei Sheng entered Juji. The picture of the sword energy rising to the heavens was deeply ingrained in his mind. Every time he thought of it, he would be in awe. Originally, he had assumed that all geniuses in the world would be so, yet what he saw today shocked him deeply once again. He had never heard of a Lianqi disciple that could comprehend sword essence. That disciple, sword essence, was not whole. With his experience, he naturally could see at first glance that this disciple had just touched the door to sword essence. His sword essence could only be called in the fledgling stage. But this was enough to surprise him. Even more, this Lianqi disciple's sword essence was extremely weak, but it was extremely pure. This quality made him extremely puzzled. When normal Xiuzhe comprehended the sword essence, at the very beginning, it was always extremely heterogeneous. Over time, through the trials of time, the trials of one's temperament, it would slowly turn to become pure. Just touching on the sword essence, and having such pure sword essence, it was something completely unimaginable. Thinking about his hard work these years, his heart didn't feel good. When did sword essence become something that even Lianqi disciples could play with? Wukong Sword Sect. This unknown sect suddenly became mysterious in Xiang's eyes. A Wei Sheng who caused an apparition in Juji, and now adding on an unknown disciple who could comprehend sword essence in the stage of Lianqi. This is our Xixiang Zhuemo. The female disciple said proudly, Xixiang is the strongest in our outer sect disciples. The other female disciples all nodded their heads in agreement. What had just happened totally changed their impressions of Zhuemo. Zombie Xixiang might be a bit greedy, but he wasn't soft in the face of danger and had a sense of responsibility. When Zhuemo had comprehended the sword essence and released that last blow, that terrifying presence made them feel deeply intimidated. Outer sect disciple. A vein throbbed in Liang Luo's forehead. A genius that could comprehend sword essence in the stage of Lianqi was only an outer sect disciple. He was very suspicious that he heard it wrong. Xianxiang's expression froze as well before quickly returning to normal. The smile on his face became even warmer. As expected, it really is heroes come from the youth. Oh, I have a Ling restoring Dan, it's just perfect for this. Come, I'll help him use it. He took out a jade bottle from his bosom and poured out a Dan about the size of a mung bean. He got off the green bull and coming to Zhuo Mo's side, he shoved the Ling restoring Dan in Zhuo Mo's mouth. Liang Luo stared with wide eyes at Xianxiang's enthusiasm. Ling restoring Dan wasn't something cheap. One pill was 20 pieces of second-grade jingsha. Even they only were given a specified portion each month. Xixiang actually gave it to a stranger. He stared dazedly at Xixiang, who seemed like a completely different person, feed another Ling herbs and even aided him in absorbing the Ling herbs. Zhuo Mo slowly woke up. When he opened his eyes, he saw a strange face. He was instantly startled and unconsciously sat up. Little brother, don't be scared. We don't have malicious aims. The other said with a smile and flashed to the side. The befuddled Zhuo Mo stood up and suddenly found his body was warm, wisps of Ling energy spreading through his body. The previous exhaustion had all been swept away. Seeing him wake up, the female disciples instantly crowded over, talking over each other as they narrated everything that had happened. It was only now that Zhuo Mo knew he had been saved by the other people. He quickly went in front of Xiang and Liang Luo to bow and give thanks. Many thanks to both elders for your rescue. This junior can't thank you enough. Little brother Zhuo doesn't have to be so courteous. I felt you familiar at first sight. Just a minor thing, don't keep it on the mind. Xiang smiled and responded, we are from Qi Sword Sect. Actually, Qi Sword Sect and Wukong Sword Sect aren't that far away. Everyone is like one family. Liang Luo wanted to roll his eyes hearing that. What was called not that far away? He had never heard that there was a Wukong sword sect in the surroundings. What was with Xixiang today? Why was he so strange? Zhuo Mo said gratefully, if the two elders hadn't lent their aid, Xiang waved his hands, interrupting Zhuo Mo's words, we'll regard each other as the same generation. I'll call you little brother Zhuo. Huh, little brother Zhuo has a limitless future, maybe it is us that are social climbing. Elder is exaggerating. Zhuo Mo couldn't understand the other's meaning. This kind of praises made him puzzled. Junior is only an outer sect disciple, there's nothing to speak of in terms of future. Xiang brushed away his annoyance, is it that little brother Zhuo doesn't like us too? Elder, it really is irritating. Zhuo Mo couldn't help but struggle. In the world of Xiuzhe, other than in the same sect, there wasn't any distinction of age between different sections. And there was no age in cultivation, and it was hard to distinguish from the appearance. Usually, most of it was divided by the cultivation. Those stronger were elders, no matter their age. Even though he couldn't detect the other's cultivation, but to be able to easily make that crowd leave, these two people were more than sufficient to be called elders by him. He was very sensible. Like that little thousand crane. If he hadn't been certain that the other wouldn't find him, he wouldn't have written such a reply. Right now, facing the others, he was naturally docile. Just at this time, Xiang smiled and informed, you can call us de Ge. I am Xiang, he is my shitty Liang Luo. Zhuo Mo was incomparably obedient and bowed again, Shi de Ge, Liang de Ge. The female disciples all looked with admiration at Zhuo Mo. To have relations with strong Xiuzhe, there were naturally many benefits. This elder in front of them clearly was admiring of Zhuo Mo Xixiang. Xixiang really hit the jackpot. As expected, they heard Xiang continue, since you have called me de Ge, as the brother, I naturally have to have a meeting gift. This, ice crystal sword, even if it is third grade, but its attributes lean towards cold and een. I saw that brother's was sword essence leans towards ice and this flying sword is perfect for you. Under a crowd of drooling gazes, Zhuemo dazedly received this flying sword. The sword was about 2 feet and 7 or so inches. The body was translucent and sparkling as though it was carved from ice, and emitted cold air. A pie fell down from heaven and hit him unconscious. The appearance of this flying sword wasn't ordinary. Zhuemo straightforwardly converted it to Jingshi in his mind. So many Jingshi. Xiang kept giving looks at Liang Luo. Liang Luo helplessly reached into his bosom and after fishing for a while, took out a folded seal paper with some pain. He threw it at Zhuemo, coldly informing, "Spirit traveling seal." Zhuemo was so happy right now he almost fainted. He wasn't clear about the price of the flying sword but he had some knowledge of the price of the spirit traveling seal. The conditions for a person to use the spirit traveling seal was not high. It was one of the rare paper seals that a lianqi could use. Putting this seal on the legs, travel 1,000 miles without being tired. It was much faster than his flying paper crane. Carefully taking the spirit traveling seal, he took a look, and determined inside that this was a third-grade spirit traveling seal. Oh! This too were so generous. However, the suspicions in his heart increased rather than decreased. There was no such thing as uncalled for love in this word. These 2 items, any one of them was worth more than his entire wealth. The other had no reason to carelessly give to someone. This was what really puzzled him. Today, we still have other matters, so farewell. After a few days, we'll go to Wukong Mountain to find you and have a drink. Xiang smiled as he bid farewell to Zhuemo and, along with Liang Luo, rode the green bulls as they quickly disappeared. Zhuemo was dumbstruck. Seeing the 2 vanish, after a beat, he suddenly said to the female disciples, "Someone pinch me, is this a dream?" 7 or 8 hands simultaneously reached over. A shriek echoed on the mountain path. "Xixiang, what were you doing?" Liang Luo was slightly discontent. A spirit traveling seal naturally wasn't anything big to him but he wasn't so generous to give it to a stranger. If it wasn't that he was extremely trusting of Xixiang, he wouldn't have even paid attention. Sitting on the green bull, Xixiang was pleased. He is an outer sect disciple. What about an outer sect disciple? There are many outer sect disciples in this world. Liang Luo said unconcernedly. Xiang glanced at Liang Luo. He asked in return, "What does Shidi feel about Zhuemo's talent?" Liang Luo choked. A moment later, he squeezed out a sentence, "Not bad, better than me." Shidi has no need to undervalue yourself. If you train hard, you will naturally win over him. Xiang was afraid that his Shidi's confidence would suffer and comforted. He then said solemnly, "However, such talents, no matter in what sect, he should be one of the more important disciples in the sect. But he actually is only an outer sect disciple." Liang Luo wasn't stupid and instantly reacted, "Does Xixiang want to recruit him into our sect? Why can't I? Such potential, that Wukong Sword sect hasn't recognized it, wouldn't it complete us? An outer sect disciple entering another sect, if Wukong Sword sect came up to our door, they wouldn't have a foot to stand on." Liang Luo knew what Xixiang said was true. The turnover rate and mobility of outer sect disciples were extremely high. Those that entered another sect were countless. If they swindled Zhuemo over, Wukong Sword sect could not move based on this. Such potential, are his elders blind? Could it be an elder purposefully putting him in the outer sect disciples to toughen? Liang Luo voiced a doubt. Xiang answered, "Haha, remember how he answered when I praise him for his limitless future? What he said proved that the definitely wasn't put in the outer sect by the elders. Thinking about that, I feel there is another possibility. It is probably that he only just comprehended the sword essence and his sect elders hadn't found out yet. Liang Luo's mind jumped, then why didn't we just take him with us right now? If he returns to the mountain and something else happened, wouldn't it be ruined? Don't panic. I saw that he was very cautious of us, and there were too many people. If we try too hard now, it would be unlikely to succeed. It's better to back off first and wait for a few days before we go find him. Move with feelings, entice with benefits, I'm confident it will work. Xiang explained confidently. Liang Luo realized, Xixiang is wise. The two smiled at each other. Eldest brother. Chapter 31 Choi Suemo had come to Dongfu many times before and would always window shop. However, to accompany women, especially a crowd of women to window shop, this required a very strong endurance of the body, probably only those who cultivated the body could endure. Seeing that they brought everything they needed, Suemo sneaked away. He first went to buy the gold ore. What Pu Yao had said last time, he remembered it. He also brought a jade stick full of basic seal formations. Even though there were teachings from the sect, but there were only just a few kinds. Seal formations were something that all Xiuzha had to learn. No matter if it was forging or making dan, it all required understanding seal formations. Suemo brought them to create ling fields in the future, even if it was far away. The jade stick didn't cost much, the expensive one was the gold ore. 20 pieces of second-grade jingsha was enough for him to suffer in pain for a long time, but he still decided to buy it. His attitude now was different than before. Before, he only looked at jingsha. Even if he still liked jingsha, but he put more importance on the future. After fourth Shirgu revealed it, he was clear that he couldn't return to the past. Those simple aspirations were completely shattered. He was walking on a road that he didn't know the destination of. What was waiting in the front for him? Breaking into pieces? Finding the answer? He didn't know. What had seemed fresh and exciting in the past was now dull and tasteless now. He found a quiet place to sit down and started to think back to the last sword energy he had released. No one taught him. Even Pu Yao only made him experience it for himself. Towards Pu Yao, he only felt grateful. If there wasn't Pu Yao, he might not even have the chance to seek answers. Now that he had the chance, how could he not treasure it? He hadn't realized his own transformation. He suddenly understood some of what Wei Xiang felt. Obsession, unrelenting obsession. Every time he thought about his appearance being changed, his mind erased. His wooden face would burn with pain, like it was reminding him there was a pair of hands that wiped away his face, that was a pair of hands that wiped away his memories. This burning that seeped in his bones made him unable to tolerate himself muddle-headedly living. He wanted answers. He was very clear just how low his starting point was. He didn't want to waste even 1 second. He thought of all the ways, worked over his minds, used all his cunning to make himself stronger, to let himself have greater power. He wanted answers. In the corner of the busy street, he serenely coiled his legs and mused. In the roaring sea of fire, Pu sat on the gravestone and lazily listened to the sound tablet. The female disciples finally brought all they needed. Everyone's faces were brimming with content. Suemo finally released a breath. He was now in a rush to return back. Today's encounter let him have a taste of power. He desperately and impatiently wanted to keep training. But in consideration of the safety of these female disciples, he still sat on the flying paper crane and slowly followed them. But he still took grasp of each bit of time. Returning to the little yard, the first thing Suemo did was put the black gold worm and the gold ore together, dig a small hole near the ling vein and bury them. After burial, he entered his consciousness. Facing Pu Yao, he said, "Pu, let's continue." Unexpectedly, Pu lazily said, "Continue?" "Continue what?" Suemo blanked before quickly recovering his calm. "What conditions do you have?" He, it's so convenient talking with smart people. Pooh smiled lightly and straightened. This is correct, where in the world are there free meals? I want souls. Souls. Suemo jumped in fear. Pooh Yao's expression was relaxed and his voice carefree as he said, souls are good things. They taste fresh, full of vitality. Blood, human meat, they can't compare. Just a few words and Suemo became quite scared. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of those great monsters, eating raw human meat, pulling tendons, sucking marrow, eating souls. For a Xianxia whose dream was becoming a ling plant farmer, things like souls were enough to make him jump out of his skin. No way. Suemo resolutely refused. Pooh Yao was truly a great monster. Even though he wanted power, but he definitely didn't want himself become a servant of power. Didn't you want to learn the sword? Other than the sword, I still have many other things to teach you, I have many talismans. As long as you have good souls, I can exchange all of it. Pooh's crimson tongue licked his lips, voice full of enticement. No way. Suemo suddenly relaxed. He sat down facing Pooh Yao, stating, I'm not interested in killing people. Oh. Pooh Yao raised a thin eyebrow, his eyes narrowing, you have to think clearly. Other people's lives, how can they be as valuable as yours? It actually is very simple to kill another. Oh, one soul and I will let you have a good comprehension of this sword essence and can teach you many things. I just knew that you didn't have good intentions. Suemo glared fixedly at Pooh, coldly stating, pity you have the wrong plan. Pooh Yao continued to chuckle. Suemo suddenly felt his body tighten and couldn't move. I'm wrong. Pooh Yao suddenly raised his voice. So many years, no one has ever dared to say I'm wrong in front of me. He slowly walked in front of the unmovable Suemo, his icy hands touching Suemo's neck, afraid. Great. I really tried many kinds and found that terror is the best flavor in all of the souls. Did you know? Souls that died with great terror, it's like a beautiful wine that fermented perfectly. Just eating it once, ooh, it is unforgettable. A cold finger swiped across the blood vessel on Suemo's neck. Pooh Yao's expression was mirthful, the crimson-red eyes flashed with craziness. Suemo's body shook. He kept telling himself not to be afraid, but terror was like a spring that couldn't be plugged, furiously sprouting out. No matter how he tried, his body wouldn't move. Struggle is useless. Pooh Yao was still smiling, his eyes cold. Your stupidity really makes me disappointed. Didn't you know, pets need to realize that they are pets. He hated this feeling. Being manipulated, being controlled, his body not in control. Something in Suemo's heart seemed to have lit up. Terror was swiftly taken over by anger. His blood seemed to have been burning. He couldn't help swearing, go to hell. Such a stubborn little thing. Pooh Yao shook his head and smiled, his right hand gently squeezing. Ah! Suemo gave a wail. His entire person seemed to be bound by an invisible hand into a strange shape. The pain in his body was like countless thin needles piercing his body. His awareness started to dull. Just at that moment, a warm stream suddenly rose up from Suemo's chest. Want to interfere? Pooh Yao seemed to have found a naughty thing and his mouth had a light smile. His entire body suddenly disappeared from his spot and appeared next to Suemo, his right hands easily thrusting into Suemo's chest. Easily taking his hand out of Suemo's chest, a 5-colored bead appeared between his fingers. This bead was the size of a mung bean. It looked like a rainbow glass, light swirling inside. Leisurely examining the small bead for a while, Pooh muttered to himself, so it was this thing. Finishing, he prepared to crush the bead. Just at this moment, his hand suddenly stopped moving. Wisps of black smoke spread from the gravestone, slow and solid. In the blink of an eye, the sky above the sea of flames was covered by black clouds. The dancing flames seemed to be quite afraid of these misty black clouds. They shrunk down, a rarely seen sight. The star that was in the sky was also robbed of light by the black clouds. Pooh dazedly stood, motionless. An extremely complicated emotion floated in his bloody eye, seemingly sorrowful, seemingly happy, seemingly fond, seemingly furious. After a long time, he said lightly, "You really want to choose such a piece of rubbish?" The black clouds moved, the layers roiling. The roaring sea of fire seemed to be suppressed, almost extinguishing, while that star in the sky had almost completely disappeared. Pooh Yao stood like a tree, seeming to not have registered it. The black clouds became even thicker. The entire sea of consciousness was now a patch of black, nothing could be seen. He suddenly sneered, the light flashing in his bloody right eye, "You do know that to want to persuade me, it isn't that simple." The surroundings became quiet. The black clouds didn't give a response and the two sides were deadlocked. After an unknown length of time, the light in Pooh Yao's bloody right eyes gradually dimmed. He suddenly laughed lightly, and with the burdens of the ages, he shrugged helplessly, "It's always like this, so boring." His finger flicked and the glass bead in his hands entered Zhuomo's body. The black clouds instantly clear without a trace to be found. The sea of fire that lost its suppressor started to once again burn fiercely. That star in the sky gave off light. Pooh Yao stared at the gravestone for a long time without speaking. Zhuomo slowly woke up. When he opened his eyes, he hurriedly inspected his body. Seeing it uninjured, he finally gave a breath of relief. What had happened? Why did Pooh Yao let go of him? Just when he was puzzled, Pooh Yao suddenly appeared. "You really took a long time to wake up." Pooh Yao's expression was full of mockery, such a fragile spirit. "Originally, I had wanted to play. I hadn't bargained for a few thousand years. It ruined my fun. But it is normal. A person that doesn't have his features or mind, his heart naturally is also soft. I'm so pitiful." Zhuomo was silent. His fists uncontrollably tightened. "Speaking about it, there is a place that has souls and you don't have to kill anyone. But it is very dangerous. How about it? Are you interested?" Pooh Yao's expression was leisurely. "What place?" Zhuomo asked in spite of himself. Just now, Pooh Yao's words pierced his heart. You don't need to know now. Don't worry, you don't need to kill anyone. You just have to say whether you agree or not. As to payment, when your conditions are enough, I naturally will let you be satisfied." "I agree." He didn't think about it further. Zhuomo nodded. As long as he didn't have to kill anyone, he wasn't afraid of danger. He didn't have anything else to lose. AI finally finished this transaction. For a few souls, this really wasn't easy. Business, not doing it for a long time, I really deteriorated. Pooh Yao ruefully said in an experienced tone. Zhuomo didn't know what to say. Pooh Yao turned his face over. "All right, let's discuss another transaction." "Another transaction?" Zhuomo was full of wariness and some puzzlement. "Jingshi, I require Jingshi." Pooh Yao chucked, "Want to experience sword essence? 10 pieces of second-grade Jingshi each time. How about it, isn't it cheap?" Zhuomo stared with a gaping mouth. Chapter 32 Refusal. The little dark gold sword cheerfully flew around Zhuomo's fingers. It was extremely fast, leaving behind a dash of gold light like a gold-colored lightning bolt. Zhuomo's eyes showed happiness. Art of Aged Gold finally reached the 3rd level. After the 3rd level, the aged gold energy also transformed. The once dark gold sands became even finer and shinier, the gold sword that was formed even more exquisite. It was like a narrow fish, nimbly darting and swerving. The little gold sword was very small. The region it moved in was only his palm, and the sword moves were all very simple. There was none of the grand moves. However, if an experienced sword shio was here, they could be shocked to find that contained in the movements of this little gold sword was a faint strand of sword essence. Xuemo could also feel this small strand of sword essence. Other than joy, he couldn't help but feel pain. Returning home, no matter how hard he tried to remember, he still couldn't find the feeling of that last sword strike that day. With no other solution, he could only spend Jingshi at Pu Yao's to experience sword essence. 10 pieces of second-grade Jingshi each time. He spent all the Jingshi he had and finally comprehended a sliver of sword essence. It was this sliver of sword essence that caused his Art of Aged Gold to break through to the 3rd level. Compared to before, the present Pu Yao was a completely unscrupulous businessman that only recognized Jingshi and nothing else. He didn't know what really happened the last time. Why did Pu Yao release him in the end? It was clear that Pu Yao's attitude towards him had changed slightly. He seemed even more impatient, even hard to communicate with. If there was no matter about him and he was called, he would ignore. But for some reason, Xuemo felt the present Pu Yao was much safer, even though he needed to spend large amounts of Jingshi. Art of Aged Gold. Reaching the 3rd level meant that he only needed one more spell to reach the 3rd level before he could become a Ling plant farmer. If he became a Ling plant farmer, his status in the sect would be drastically different. The sect would supply him with large amount of resources, and then he could even more quickly increase his strength. The question he was facing now was what spell to choose to make a breakthrough. In the end, he chose Art of Flora. In the low-level spells, Art of Flora was renowned for its complicated finger motions. This was also the reason that Xuemo chose it. Finger motions, its trace could be found in almost all low-level spells. Low-level Xianxia didn't have enough cultivation and frequently needed the assistance of the finger motions to completely cast. Even though after the stage of Jingdan, finger motions would almost completely disappear, but before that, finger motions was a very useful technique. Just as Xuemo was concentrating on practicing his finger motions, Pu Yao, sitting on the gravestone in the sea of consciousness, snorted and said to himself, "You just chose this piece of rubbish?" After practicing for a long time, Xuemo found that he was stuck at the same level. If he wanted to improve more, it was very difficult. His finger motions were actually very proficient, but it was always lacking flow. Thinking about the special feeling when he used Art of Flora to help Liang Feng Shiji and the others weed, he guessed that was the direction he should work at. But the profound feeling, similar to when he had released the sword at the enemy last time, no matter how he thought, he couldn't find it. Asking Pu Yao. It was a pity that Xuemo didn't have any more Jingshi. For the next following days, he still didn't have any ideas. The stubbornness in Xuemo's bones was aroused. Wasn't it just finger motions? He thought of a way. He took out a basin of water. Submerging both hands in the water, he started to practice his finger motions underwater. The feeling under in the water was expectedly different. The resistance was much greater. The finger motions, originally well practiced, instantly became scattered. Xuemo instantly became alert. He felt he found the direction. What he was most afraid of was not having a direction. If he could find the direction, he could overcome even the biggest problem. Just at this time, Shixiang and Liang Luo came to visit as they promised. The two's visit was very unexpected to Xuemo. He had originally thought the two were insincere and just said it, and never though they would actually really come. Tu Ning my Xianxia coming to visit a Lianqi outer sect disciple. No one would believe it. Huh, little brothers Hua, it's only been a few days, and you've improved greatly. I think that very soon you would enter Zhuji. Shixiang smiled and then with a face full of concern, said, have you prepared what you need for Zhuji? I have a few Zhuji Dan here, the grade isn't bad. Xuemo was even more cautious. Unreasonable attention, if it wasn't malicious, it was robbery. The other was way too enthusiastic and he automatically was on the defense. His mouth hurried replied, "Sure de ge is too kind. Just a while ago, 4th Shirgu bestowed a Zhuji Dan, it's enough for me." Liang Luo and Xiang quietly exchanged a look but this didn't escape Suomo's watch. Xiang smiled, responding, that's good, that's good." Inside, he thought that it was not going well. Had Suomo's elders started to pay attention to his potential? Such a genius such as little brother Suo would always attract attention no matter the place. Haha. When are you becoming an inner sect disciple, we can come and celebrate. He didn't give up and probed. Suo shook his head, our sect needs Zhuji before it is enough to become an inner sect disciple. It's still too early. Hope rose in Xiang. His face was greatly shocked, oh, but such a great talent as little brothers will also have to be limited by such old-fashioned rules. He didn't know what the other wanted. Suo said cautiously, "Sure de ge is joking, where do I count as a genius?" At one side, Liang Luo was already impatient. He always liked being straightforward and crisply opened, "Little brother Suo, why don't you come to our Qi sword sect? If you are willing to come, you would definitely be a core disciple." Xiang looked nervously at Suo blanked. After a long beat, he finally reacted and smiled hesitantly, "Both de ge, don't joke. This brother knows how much I'm worth." Xiang said seriously, "We aren't joking and are inviting you sincerely. Little brother's was talents are exceptional, but the hardship in the long journey of cultivation, I'm sure that little brother's is very clear. With your talents, you should try to enter Zhuji as fast as possible and leave behind the common duties, concentrate on cultivating and be assisted by guidance from elders. I cannot promise that you could reach the top but becoming Jin Dan, the possibility is very great." Suo stared dazedly at the two people. If you are always entangled in these common duties, no matter how good your talents are, they would be wasted. Xiang said earnestly. They were sincere. Suo believed in the two people's words but suddenly he also felt this was preposterous. At what time did he become exceptionally talented and was invited by others to enter a sect? Talent? He didn't have that kind of thing. Otherwise, would the sect leader not have seen it? The sect leader had been the one that brought him back. In the past he would sometimes think that maybe it was that the sect leader didn't have good enough insight but the presence that night the sect leader and the Shirshu had exuded made him understand that the Shirshu that usually didn't appear were all powerful and extraordinary people. The two people were only interested in him because of Pu Yao. If other people had the same opportunities as him, they would definitely be much stronger than him. He thought about 2 years ago, the instant that he opened his eyes. Thought about him sweating up a storm in the Ling fields. Xiang and Liang Luo didn't speak. They were quietly waiting for Suomo's choice. Even though they didn't understand what he had to hesitate about. They had given sufficient sincerity. This kind of benefits, giving them to a Lianqi disciple, it had never happened at Qi Sword Sect. After a long time, when the lowered head of Suo rose and the muddled eyes recovered clarity, the two knew that Suo had made a choice. Suo said earnestly, "Many thanks to both de Ge for your goodwill. This brother appreciates it. These years, I'm used to living in Wukong Sword Sect. The sect and the elders have been very attentive to me and I have no intentions of leaving." The tone wasn't heavy but it was full of a kind of determination. In his sea of consciousness, Pu Yao disdainfully spat out a word, "Idiot." Disappointed expressions came upon Xiang and Liang Luo's faces. But they also knew that it wouldn't be effective to speak more. They didn't have the interest in chatting and after exchanging a few more words, they bid farewell. Sending away the two, Suo returned to his little yard and stared into space. Then he continued to bury his head in practicing, Art of Flora. The time passed by extremely full. Pu Yao didn't pay attention to Suo was happy to not be disturbed. If the devil didn't torment him, he thanked the earth and the heavens. Every day, he would travel to Cold Mist Valley, learn to care for all kinds of Ling herbs. After Art of Aged Gold reached the 3rd level, the power increased greatly. He inspected all the Ling herbs in Cold Mist Valley one by one and found some deeply hidden pests. After spending effort to exterminate those pests, his Art of Aged Gold became even more proficient. He still couldn't imprint on the flying sword, so he decided to use the little aged gold sword to practice sword scriptures and ruminate on sword essence. In the water, he practiced Art of Flora, and reinforced his finger movements. All the other time, he devoted it all to embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. The main use of embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was to increase consciousness, but Mo found that it could also increase Ling energy. The effects were much better than his mainstream crappy 10 Principles scripture. He basically abandoned 10 Principles scripture, and changed to cultivate embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Every day, he only rested for 4 hours. All the other time was put on cultivation, continuous cultivation. During this period of time, he wanted his Art of Flora to reach the 3rd level. After this little while, the new cycle of planting Ling grains would arrive. He would be occupied. In that case, there would be much less time left for cultivation. In the basin of water, a pair of withered hands, from fingertip to wrist, were all immersed in water. The parts above the wrist were bare in the air. Mo's eyes were closed, exhaling and concentrating. Suddenly, the 10 thin fingers moved, fast as light, creating layers of undercurrents, the movements adding a kind of cold flavor. The speed at which the fingers moved was extremely fast. The surface of the water was like boiling water, countless undercurrents restlessly moving, but what was strange was that not even a drop splashed. The 2 wrists seemed to be made of copper, not moving a sliver. The nimbleness of the 10 fingers were astounding, the dazzling finger movements changing. The closed eyes didn't open. Mo's breathing unconsciously became heavier. The movements of his hands became even faster. The fingers under the water were unable to be distinguished. Splashes bloomed like flowers, the speed became faster, the collision between splashes suddenly became vicious. The water in the basin seemed to have been lifted by an invisible hand. The surface of the water completely raised up 2 centimeters. As the speed of the 10 fingers became faster, the surface became even higher. That pair of withered hands seemed to have a strange attraction, sucking the ball of water and holding it in midair. Suddenly, Mo opened his eyes. The 10 fingers in the water suddenly became straight. Bang! The ball of water sucked onto the hands broke like a vase, turning into 10 bursts of water arrows, slashing out. Joy made its way onto Mo's eyes. Chapter 33 The Spring Sprout Jade Metal Dong Fu. As one of the 13 primary towns of Tianyujie, all kinds of authorities were very developed. Even though Tianyujie was governed by Kunlun Jing, and it was primarily made up of sword sects, but the requirements of sword shio to need all kinds of resources wasn't small. So while the core disciples of all the sects cultivated the sword, they would still try very hard to attract other kinds of shouja. Different shouja received different treatment. The same types of shouja would also receive different treatment based on their cultivation. Due to this, the evaluations of all kinds of professions were extremely important. It would be a very difficult thing to get a sword shio to determine the skill level of a ling plant farmer. For each shouja, after being professionally licensed, they could quickly find a satisfactory job in every location. All kinds of cultivators had their own authorities. The ling plant farmers had the Institute of Ling Plants, the beast speakers had the Institute of Beast Language. Congratulations, it's very rare to see such a young ling plants farmer in Dongfu. And you have comprehended the 4th level of Little Art of Cloud and Rain, your future is limitless. The ling plant farmer responsible for the exam smiled as he gave Mo a jade medal. Barely visible inside the metal was a small and tender sprout, 5 elements energy revolving around it. The jade metals of a Ling plant farmer were sorted into 4 levels. Spring sprout, summer flower, autumn fruit and winter hibernation. There were even finer distinctions at each level, but those exams were extremely complicated. Many Ling plant farmers only ever did the licensing for the 4 levels. Suemo joyfully took the jade metal. To get this jade metal, he really hadn't wasted all his effort. The Ling plants farmer in Dongfu only had the authority to give out spring sprout jade metals. To get a higher level jade metal, he needed to go to a more prosperous place. However, in the short term, Suemo completely didn't have to consider that problem. The leveling up of Ling plants farmers was extremely hard. The summer flower jade metal required all 5 kinds of spells to reach the 5th level. Other than that, they needed to know how to create Ling fields above the 4th grade. After giving thanks to the elder, Suemo decided to leave the institute. Just as he came out of the Institute of Ling Plants, numerous people instantly circled around. Mr. Zhua, our sect desperately needs a Ling plant farmer. Is Mr. Zhua willing? Don't listen to him, he's only a small sect, can't give good benefits. Our sect is much more prosperous, you can ask for all the benefits if you are willing to come to our sect. The explosions of sound caused Suemo's head to turn to a mess. Just at this time, a deep voice suddenly interrupted, sorry, excuse me. Everyone, don't block my Shiji, 1. Sorry, please make way. The voice wasn't loud but everyone heard it clearly. A hidden presence spread and the crowd naturally made way. Just this cultivation was enough to make everyone stop talking. Seeing the smiling fat person not far away, Suemo's heart jumped and he hurriedly went up to bow, 3rd Shishu. And then bowed to Li Yingfeng behind Yan Lu, Shiji. The smile on Yan Li's face was harmonious and affable. He patted Suemo's shoulder, not bad, not bad. Didn't think a Ling plant farmer could come out of our sect. The sect leader will be ecstatic. If it wasn't that I had something to do in Dongfu, I'm afraid I wouldn't even know. At this time, Li Yingfeng added, when Shidi went weeding a short while ago, I knew that our sect would soon have a Ling plant farmer. But I didn't think Shidi would be this fast. Shidi, congratulations. Just a fluke. Facing Yan Lushirshu, Suemo was extremely nervous. A great monster was still living in his head. If Shirshu found out. He barely kept his composure, his mouth going, my luck was good recently. Originally, even I thought it would take longer. This clearly says that our sect is soon to rise. The smile on Yan Li's face became energetic, let's go, today is a happy occasion. Pick whatever you like, it would be Shirshu's gift to you. Li Yingfeng smiled from the side, adding, yeah, Shidi made this such an unexpected attack, as a Shiji, I didn't even have time to prepare a present. No, Shiji is too polite. Suemo furiously waved his hand. Standing beside 3rd Shirshu, he was extremely nervous and didn't dare to even breathe heavily. But 3rd Shirshu started to talk and pull him at the same time. Of the wealthiest in the sect, 3rd Shirshu would be the wealthiest. 3rd Shirshu had managed all the assets of the sect for many years and accumulated much wealth. Based on what could be seen now, Yan Lushirshu seemed to want to nurture Li Yingfeng Shiji into his successor. Suemo felt this was pretty good. Li Yingfeng Shiji was straightforward and honest, knew how to conduct herself and had a pretty good relationship with him. The store that 3rd Shirshu took him to was naturally much higher class than what he normally shopped at. All kinds of talismans dazzled his eyes, a veritable feast. What he picked most of was jade sticks. For him, the jade sticks that recorded all kinds of scriptures and spells were what he needed the most. Yan Lu also noticed it and his attitude towards Suemo became even more amiable. The fact that Suemo would get the spring sprout jade medal before he entered Juji was proof of his exceptional talents. After getting the jade medal, he wasn't greedy and lived it up. What he picked the most were still jade sticks, that meant that he had strong motivations to keep going. A young disciple that had both of those points, even if they didn't have good opportunities, they would definitely reach a pretty good height. There wasn't an elder that didn't like this kind of disciples, especially Yan Lo, who was used to the mediocrity of the disciples in the sect. He knew that there hadn't been any attention paid to this disciple in the past. If he didn't rope him in now, then he would be too stupid. Today, he had coincidentally been at Dong Fu to take care of matters. Hearing that someone had received a jade medal, he had come over to see if he could attract them and hadn't thought it would be a disciple of his sect. He couldn't help picking out a pile of talismans that Sua Mo could have a use for. At the side, Li Yingfeng also recognized that even though her zombie shitty hadn't entered Juji, but in reality, he had already become one of the core disciples. Maybe in the Wukong sword sect of the future, Wei Xianxia would be in charge of fighting, Sua Mo shitty of internal matters, and she would take over her master's role and be responsible for external matters. Especially since no one could replace her and Sua Mo in their roles. Looking at it now, Luo Li Shixiang was unable to threaten Wei Xianxia's position. Also, Wei Xianxia's relationship with Sua Mo shitty was extremely good. For the elders, they were naturally happy to see everyone cooperating. Li Yingfeng, who sorted out her thoughts, was also generous and gave 2 talismans to Sua Mo. Sua Mo's mind was completely blown. Holding a pile of talismans and jade sticks, his awareness was dizzy. Any item that he was holding now, in the past, was something he dreamed about. Now he was holding a pile in his hands. The affable smile on Shishu's face made him think of a previous life. In the past 2 years, after the first time he met the sect leader when he woke up, he had never spoken to another Shishu after that. And all of this, it was only because he received a jade medal. The gray-beaked goose flew steadily, its back broad and soft. It was very comfortable sitting on the top, nothing that Sua Mo's impotent flying paper crane could compare to. Little Mo doesn't have a steed yet. Yan Lo said and turned to orderly Yingfeng, I remember there are still a few more gray-beaked geese, send one to little Mo. Tell the people below to send over ling grass as necessary. Yes. Li Yingfeng noted it down. Sua Mo thought to himself, their sect does have some wealth. When the 3 reached the gates of the mountain, the outer sect disciples had already lined up at the gates to welcome them. It was evident that the sect leader had already known of the news that he had received a jade medal. Their gazes as they looked at him were extremely complicated. Jealousy, admiration, dissatisfaction. Just a day ago, everyone was the same outer sect disciples. Today, they needed to come out to welcome him. Not many people had been surprised that Wei Xianxia would become an inner sect disciple since he had been the first among the outer sect disciples and established a powerful image in their hearts. But among them, Sua Mo hadn't been exceptional. Other than his little art of cloud and rain, and that face that never had an expression, there were very few places which he had that people would remember. Some of the people had caution and fear in their eyes as they looked at Sua Mo. They had once bullied Sua Mo and was afraid he was going to get back at them now. Even the most stupid knew that it was certain that Sua Mo was going to become an inner sect disciple. Seeing the looks of these people, Sua Mo's heart wasn't comfortable either but felt slightly relieved. He had finally left this group, that meant that he had made progress. For him, any kind of progress right now was incredibly valuable and he didn't care about the looks of the other outer sect disciples. The gray-beaked goose didn't slow down but followed the mountain path past the outer sect disciples respectfully standing as it climbed. Wukong Hall was the discussion place of Wukong sword sect. Many of the main matters of the sect were held here. When Sua Mo and the others arrived, the sect leader and the other Shishu were already waiting in Wukong Hall, faint expressions of joy on their faces. The fact that someone from the sect could qualify for a spring sprout jade medal was definitely an unexpected delight. And such a young disciple, his future would be limitless. First there was Wei Sheng who had such outstanding talent and now there was a disciple in Lianqi that could receive a medal. They were completely bowled over by joy. Facing so many of the Shirshu for the first time, Mo couldn't help but be nervous. Xianxia pair of cold eyes made him feel there was a blade behind his back, his entire body frozen. Please, Pu Yao, don't make a fuss now. Just as he was nervous, the sect leader Pei Yuan ran opened. At the beginning when I picked you up, I didn't have too many expectations for you, and didn't give much care. To be able to achieve all this, it is all your own efforts and extremely rare. To not give up in such a hopeless situation, swimming against the current, very good. In our sect, whatever strength you have determines the level of treatment. You showed your potential and so the sect will treat you better, do not have hate. Pei Yuan Ran was very straightforward. The bits of hate in Mo's heart had dissipated much upon hearing the sect leader's words. This disciple doesn't dare. He said with his head lowered. Pei Yuan Ran nodded his head and his voice became warmer. Now that you have a jade medal, you are the only Ling plant farmer in our sect. The treatment in the past is naturally not appropriate for you. I heard your fourth Shirgu say that you are responsible for the medicine fields of Cold Mist Valley now. This will depend now on whether you have the interest. From this day onwards, you are formally one of the inner sect disciples of our sect. You will receive the same allowance of Jingshi as your other Xixiang. Other than that, our sect's West Wind Valley has a patch of empty third-grade Ling fields, that will be given to you. The Ling energy is thick in the valley, you could move to live inside the valley and try to enter Zhuji earlier. If you need anything, you can ask your third Shirshu. As to the Ling fields inside the valley, you can plant whatever you want. We will not interfere. You can also use the other empty Ling fields in the sect, but at the end you need to give 3/10 to the sect. Mo's eyes widened, his gaze stupefied. He felt that he was going to faint. The sect leader was giving an entire mountain valley to him. Refers to disciple of a younger generation. Means nephew. Chapter 34 Inner Sect Disciple Pei Yuan Ran looked at Mo who was stupefied and a mirth-filled smirk flashed at the corner of his lips. All inner sect disciples must have a master. Since you received the Spring Sprout Jade Medal, you should go under your fourth Shirgu's line. Your fourth Shirgu is skilled at making Dan. No one else in the sect can compare to her knowledge of Ling herbs. Even in Dongfu, she is famous for this knowledge. What do you think of becoming her pupil? Mo shook and instantly reacted. Bowing his head to Shifeng Rong he said, this disciple greets master. Entering fourth Shirgu's line, it was the best possible outcome for him. His skills laid in farming and that is very beneficial for making Dan. The demands of Ling herbs in making Dan were very large. Stand. Shifeng Rong said lightly, her voice sounding like her usual iciness. Mo obediently stood. Shimmy, in the future, he'll be in your care. Pei Yuan Ran said solemnly. Xixiang, don't worry. I definitely wouldn't conceal any of my knowledge. But if he isn't willing to put any effort in, Xixiang cannot blame me. Shifeng Rong's cold words were like a basin of ice-cold water that instantly woke Mo from his joy. He suddenly had a bad feeling. The implication in Master's words made him feel apprehensive. Pei Yuan Ran nodded his head and spoke, this is good, turning to ask Mo, do you have any questions? Mo shook his head rapidly to show he didn't have any more questions. Originally, he had wanted to ask if he could ask second Shirshu if he had any questions about forging. He suddenly remembered at the snow-white sword essence that tortured him countless times, and made him want to die, that it originated from Xianxia Shirshu. The words that reached his mouth instantly shrunk back. He felt that he was crazy, why would he ever have such a stupid idea? Wasn't that walking straight into a trap? Pu Yao was still in his consciousness. After his fright dissipated, his brain instantly recovered its clarity. He felt that in the future, he had to be a bit more careful. He might be an inner sect disciple now, but if Pu Yao was exposed, he was certain that the first reaction of Xianxia was to cut him up along with Pu Yao. Subdue Yao and exterminate Mo. That was too terrifying. Even though he was not as terrified as he used to be when facing that sword essence, but that was only in his consciousness. In the real world, one blow from Xianxia's sword was enough to tear him into countless pieces. Pu Yao might be arrogant in front of Sui Mo, but Pu Yao estimated if he had to face Xianxia, he would also be killed instantly. He still remembered the scene when Xianxia's sword cleaved the Black Sea. Pei Yuan Ran detected Sui Mo's nervousness but didn't put any importance on it. Which disciple in their sect didn't tremble when they saw the masters? The sect leader and the Shishu were all very busy. Even though it was a delight that Sui Mo became a ling plant farmer, but the Shishu wouldn't spend too much time on this matter. The sect leader gave a few more words of encouragement and then left with the other Shishu. Shi Fengrong moved away gracefully and Sui Mo hurried to catch up. Shi Fengrong didn't turn her head back and said, seemingly to herself, I have warned you, but in the end, you choose the road to walk. Since you are now my disciple, I naturally will have my demands. Your private matters, I will not interfere, but what I order to be done, you have to complete it. Following behind, Sui Mo's heart almost jumped out of his chest as he answered, yes. Go attend to your own matters. After a few days, I will send someone to find you, Shi Fengrong said. Sui Mo carefully saw his master away, his heart very depressed. It seemed that his master wasn't easy to interact with. Returning to his little yard, he found the outside was full of people. Almost all the outer sect disciples were waiting for him. Aiya, Xixiang's back. I had said it before, with Xixiang's talents, wouldn't getting an inner sect position be easy? Xixiang, this is a small token of little brother's regard. Not enough to pay respects, Xixiang, don't look down, Sui Mo's head swelled up. Originally, he had prepared to reject the gifts, but noticing the worried glances of these people, he accepted the various gifts. As expected, when they saw him accept the gifts, these outer sect disciples all gave expressions of joy. Knowing that they would disturb Sui Mo, they only gave their congratulations and stayed for a short while before leaving. The little yard finally returned to its normal silence. Releasing a breath, Sui Mo held a large pile of various gifts as he walked into the yard and put the gifts down. This entire day today was so fantastical. Taking out the spring sprout jade metal, he gently caressed it, feeling the fineness and smoothness of the jade metal. His body was very tired but his mental state was still excited. The sect leader had divided an entire mountain valley to him. Even though part of it was due to his ling plant farmer profession, but this kind of benefits was still very generous. Other than Wei Xixiang, it probably would be him that had the best benefits. Suddenly remembering the jade box that he had buried in the ling vein of the seclusion room, he instantly became alert. Quickly running to the seclusion room, carefully digging out the jade box, he opened it for a look. The gold ore had disappeared as expected, and the black gold worm had clearly changed. There was a new additional mark on the pure black shell similar to a coin, extremely eye-catching. Sui Mo ran into his sea of consciousness. Pu Yao was sitting on the gravestone, listening to the sound tablet. He didn't even blink an eyelid. Shrouded in the black clouds, the red rhombus-shaped jewel was alluring and attractive. After last time, Pu Yao had continued to maintain this attitude. He seemed like a completely different person than before. Pu, has this black good worm reached 4th level? Sui Mo tried his best to make his tone as friendly as possible. 5 pieces of 2nd grade jingsha. Pu reached out a palm. As expected. When did this guy become even more greedy than he was? Sui Mo didn't get it. Almost all of his jingsha ended up in Pu Yao's wallet, yet he hadn't found Pu Yao using the jingsha for anything. Pu Yao was like a bottomless hole that ate jingsha. Supposedly Yao could eat souls. However, compared to just a Lianqi cultivator, Yaoma was an insurmountably strong and incredibly distant entity. What function did eating souls have, only ghosts would know. In the future, he should go to the records in the sect where it was possible to find some traces. In any case, now that he was an inner sect disciple, the records in the sect were open to him. But right now, he could only comply. Okay. Suemo gritted his teeth and decided to spend the money. When his voice landed, 5 pieces of Jingshi disappeared from his wallet. On this point, Pu Yao was much better than before. He would never take extra. Yes. Pu Yao spat out a word. Glee rose in Suemo's heart. He remembered that Pu Yao had said that 4th-grade black gold worms were able to find Ling veins. How do I get it to find Ling veins? 50 pieces of 2nd-grade Jingshi. Pu Yao made an outrageous demand without even raising an eyelid. Suemo was dumbstruck. After a moment, he gave a wail, "You're killing me." This was definitely premeditated. Suemo only had 52 pieces of Jingshi remaining. He hadn't thought that Pu Yao's opening quote was his entire wealth. Pu Yao disregarded Suemo's struggle, "I increase the amount by 10 Jingshi every day." Suemo almost spat blood, but Pu Yao was at a complete advantage. Suemo had no other choice. Gritting his teeth, he said fiercely, "Fine. If it's 50, then 50 it is." Clink, clink, clink. The sound of Jingshi moving was extremely clear. Pu Yao was doing it on purpose. Suemo's teeth itched in hate, but he didn't have any solution. An enormous benefit was enticing him. If the black gold worm really could find Ling veins, it would be nothing less than a long-term benefit for him. Finding Ling veins, he could then create high-grade Ling fields. Adding on his techniques as a Ling plant farmer, no matter what he planted, it was certain that there was more profit to be made. Right now, he was an inner sect disciple. If he could find a new Ling vein, other than giving up a portion to the sect, the large majority would still land in his pocket. Jingshi was one of the factors of strength, especially when he had at his side a money-grubbing Yaoma like Pu Yao. Pu Yao threw a spell fragment at him. This spell allowed him to control Ling worms, and it was very short and easy to learn. Suemo easily learnt the spell in a short amount of time. Suemo treated the worm like treasure. If his own yard had a small section of Ling veins, it was possible there were more Ling veins in the Wukong Mountains. Every section of Ling veins were very valuable, even the thinnest Ling vein. Even though West Wind Valley had been assigned to him, but Ling fields, especially high-grade Ling fields, were in short supply. Just his master's place, it needed large amounts of Ling fields to support. The price of high-grade materials were just way too expensive. He had started to try to engage in business. The benefits of a Ling plant farmer was pretty good, but it wasn't as fast at earning Jingshi like other kinds of shouja. The little section of Ling vein in the seclusion room had disappeared already. Suemo speculated that it disappeared due to the black gold worm absorbing all of the Ling energy. Even though he had meditated there for a long time, the Ling veins hadn't been affected at all. It must have been that he was in Lianqi, and the amount of Ling energy he absorbed each time he meditated was a pitiful amount, so the Ling veins hadn't been affected. In the process of the black gold worm increasing its grade, it needed too much Ling energy and in the end, caused the Ling vein to disappear. However, this caused the last regret in Suemo's heart to disappear. The most valuable thing in this entire yard was this section of Ling vein. He decided to go take a look at West Wind Valley. West Wind Valley was located between 3 peaks, but as none of the 3 peaks were high, the sunlight that streamed into the valley was plentiful. Compared to the coldness and humidity in Cold Mist Valley, this place was much warmer and welcoming. Holding the copper medal the sect leader had given, Suemo carefully avoided the Jinji along the road. The Jinji in this place wasn't as strict as Cold Mist Valley, but far beyond anything that a Zhuji cultivator could content, much less the little Lianqi cultivator that Suemo was. But his spiritual power just had to be much stronger than the typical Lianqi, so the pressure he felt from the Jinji was much stronger than normal Xiuzhe. Carefully passing through the Jinji, he could see this was much more desolate than Cold Mist Valley. The geography of the valley was very flat. There was only a patch of about 20 mu of ling fields. Based on the looks, it seemed to be third grade. Even though the weeds were growing all around, but there were still people who came to this 20 mu of ling fields at intervals to take care of it. The grade hadn't dropped. 20 mu of ling fields wasn't very much, but this 20 mu of ling fields was going to become his personal property. The entire West Wind Valley was going to become his private property. In here, he could do whatever he wanted. This benefit was very generous. Looking at the Ling energy encapsulated in the Ling fields, and the enormous mountain valley that belonged to him, a feeling of satisfaction rose. The only regret Suemo had was that there wasn't a waterfall here. If there was a small waterfall, it would be perfect. Looking at the old trees and weeds in the surroundings, his heart suddenly moved. Taking out the black gold worm from his bosom, he casted the spell. The black god worm spread out on the ground and started to slowly crawl. Since this place belonged to him, then if he explored it, it should be very reasonable. Honk honk honk. Suomo's strange gong-like laugh echoed through West Wind Valley. Chapter 35 Discovery. The black gold worm, once it landed on the ground, was motionless. After a while, the antennas started to wave, reaching out in every direction. No wonder it was a fourth-grade black gold worm. Suemo praised it silently. This kind of intelligence was not something normal ling worms would have. The black gold worm raised its head after a while. The two antennas in the front slightly shook as it quickly crawled along the ground. It sometimes stopped or sometimes slowly proceeded. Suemo carefully casted the control spell, tightly following the worm from behind, not daring to relax his watch even slightly. Other than the ling fields, various weeds dominated all other areas of the valley. This created some difficulties for Suemo. He took out the ice crystal sword that Xiang had given him to cut out a path. Grasping the translucent ice crystal sword in his hand, it gave off a kind of bone-aching cold. The good thing was the blade was extremely sharp and pretty good at cutting up grass and wood. Suddenly, the black good worm stopped but then went at an even faster speed. It went deep into the grass-covered land. Suemo instantly became alert. Carrying the icy crystal sword, he followed right after. The black gold worm stopped in front of a protruding rock. Following closely behind, Suemo narrowed his eyes and started to examine this large piece of rock. The rock was a normal granite, about 50 or 60 feet tall. From the outside, there was nothing special about it. Was the mystery located inside the rock? In any case, this place was his own private one. It didn't matter how he played with it. Lifting up the ice crystal sword, he started to dig at the rock. Granite might be hard, but facing a third-grade flying sword, it was like tofu. In a short while, Suemo dug out a large hole. As expected, the black gold worm climbed into the hole. This caused Suemo to be even more motivated, his hand moving faster. This rock was even bigger than he had imagined. When he dug for more than an hour, and it was 70 or 80 feet deep, it still hadn't reached the bottom. In the end, Suemo wasn't one of those that cultivated the body. His two arms seemed to be filled with lead, his entire body almost falling apart. No way, it's killing me. He collapsed on the ground, panting as he looked dispiritedly at the black gold worm lying on the bottom of the hole. Bro, you are really obsessed. Gu can't do it, need to sleep first. He grimaced at the black gold worm. Finishing, he fell into a deep sleep in the hole he had just dug. When Suemo opened his eyes, he saw a patch of blackness. Sitting up, the moonlight came in through the opening of the hole. The inside of the hole was slightly illuminated. The black gold worm was still silently motionless at the bottom of the hole, the gold coin on its back releasing a faint gold light in the dark of the rock hole. It was already night. Xuemo drifted off into his thoughts for a while before he took up the ice crystal sword again. "Brother, let us continue." Ding ding, dong dong. The continuous sound of a sword cutting rocks rang inside West Wind Valley. Xuemo continued to dig mechanically straight down until the sky was almost filled with light. Xuemo suddenly felt the icy crystal sword in his hand had cut into empty space. His heart instantly jumped, his exhaustion swept away. Putting power into his hands, he quickly cut out the last thin piece of rock. Behind the rock was a large black hole. Xuemo's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. The black gold worm didn't hesitate. Flashing into the black hole, it quickly vanished. Xuemo forced himself to swallow his spit and he hesitated for a moment before holding the ice crystal sword and squeezing into the black hole. The black hole was much deeper than he had imagined. As he went deeper, his heart became heavier. There were clear signs of human cutting in here, but it would have been long ago since there was a strong moldy odor in the cave. Who had made a dwelling here? Was this the tomb of one of the sex elders? This guess made him very excited. He walked quickly into the deeper regions. There was a thin connection being maintained between him and the black gold worm. He was able to know things about the situation ahead. Very quickly, he saw the black gold worm. In the darkness, the gold coin mark of the black gold worm could be seen from far away. The black gold worm was spread out over a lump, unwilling to leave. Xuemo scanned the surroundings. This was a very crude stone room. There was a spring in the corner, a stone desk, a stone bed, and nothing else. When he went closer, Xuemo was frightened out of his wits. The black gold worm was actually on a pile of bones. Xuemo's heartbeat increased. His mouth became dry, he resisted the great terror inside himself and walked for a closer look. He didn't know whose remains these were. It was spread out on the ground. From the appearance, it seemed to have been a long time ago. He looked around. His eyes suddenly became dumbstruck and then he showed a joyous expression. This was the death place of one of the sex elders. With the fastest speed possible, he picked up the various jade sticks and talismans on the ground. He seemed like an extremely hungry beggar who suddenly saw bread. There weren't many talismans, and it had been too long since they were supported with Ling energy, their functions were almost entirely gone. In comparison, there were many more jade sticks, about 20 or so. He explored every corner, not leaving anything behind before Xuemo's eyes once again went back to the pile of bones. The black gold worm was lying on that pile of bones, motionless, but the gold coin mark on the back seemed slightly brighter. To have died here, it definitely was his sex elders. He had received such a big convenience from them. Pondering for a second, Xuemo bowed 3 times to the pile of bones and then lightly buried the bones in a corner. Moving away the bones, Xuemo found that there was actually a prayer mat underneath the bones. Prayer mat. He blanked. This white mat, it was almost the same as the mat that the nameless Xixiang had left behind in the seclusion room at Xuemo's little yard. He hurriedly poured out the jade sticks that he had put away in front of him. One by one, he poured Ling energy in. After a while, he managed to generally understand the cause and effect. This rock room was the death place of an elder in the sect, but this elder was actually an outer sect disciple. What Xuemo felt even more unimaginable was that this was the elder who had always been an outer sect disciple but almost managed to enter Jindan, who was also the previous owner of Xuemo's little yard. The matters of the world were just this fantastical. Xuemo dumbly sat there and couldn't help but sigh. This Xixiang, called Wei Nan, was an outer sect disciple from 300 years ago. He had a special ability. He was naturally sensitive to Ling veins. So he could find that weak Ling vein, build the little yard and painstakingly cultivate her. Even though he had the help of the Ling vein, but he didn't have good talent at cultivating and just barely kept up with the other disciples. He had great ambitions and didn't want to live a mediocre life. He racked his brains and thought of all kinds of methods. In many places, Wei Nan Shixiang was extremely similar to Zhua Mo. Wei Nan also chose Ling plant farmer as his best path to riches. However, his talents in the area of the 5 elements were not as good as Zhua Mo's, and it took him 5 long years before he barely became a Ling plant farmer. But Wei Nan didn't tell anyone else. From then on, he started to learn how to make Dan, yet his talents in making Dan was also average. After spending 10 years, he finally managed to make his first 4th grade Ling Dan. He developed slowly in cultivation, yet his talent developed rapidly. He was even able to detect the Ling veins buried deep underground. When he was 37, he found this Ling vein. Afraid that the sect would take it away if they knew, he quietly created this rock room. Taking advantage of the Ling veins, he finally reached Ningmai at 40 years of age. At this time, he was still an outer sect disciple. Wei Nan was extremely talented at concealment and pretense. No one in the sect managed to find that his cultivation had risen to Ningmai. Due to the fact that his potential truly was too average, he was afraid that his Ningmai cultivation would cause the elders in the sect to be suspicious and from that, find the sect of the Ling veins. He was satisfied with seclusion. After painstaking management through the years, he had some measure of wealth. He continuously purchased all kinds of jade sticks. What he learned was extremely broad and mixed. He didn't know what caused it, but in that period of time, the progression of his Ling energy became faster. He was extremely happy and put even more effort into collecting all kinds of jade sticks. The more odd the jade stick, the more he was obsessed. And no matter how strange the jade stick, he would always try it out. When he had reached 50 years old, the number of spells and scriptures he needed to practice each day reached 15 kinds. At that time, he knew he had no hope of entering Jindan and killed off his dream. In the following 20 years, he started to organize and study the variety of odd jade sticks and scriptures that he had collected. His cultivation was limited, but his scope of knowledge and spells was very wide. There weren't many that could compare to him. In addition, he had cultivated many of the unpopular scriptures for a few decades and had many conclusions. Comparing the different scriptures, he finally managed to finish the summary and organization of all the types of scriptures he had collected through his lifetime. In total, there were 20 sticks. No name, nothing too profound. It was the last thing he left in this world. Carefully putting away the jade sticks that were on the ground, Zhua Mo was full of respect for this elder Wei Nan. He lifted the mat, went to the spring and carefully poured water over to wash it. Even though so many years had passed, after a gentle wash, the mat once again recovered its snowy white appearance. This mat wasn't something ordinary. It was made from meditation grass and its effect was to calm the heart. It wouldn't decay, won't have worms for hundreds of years. It was much rarer than the mat from the little yard. He put the mat back in its original spot and sat on it. A thick Ling energy seemed to pour in through his skin. He quickly entered mediation and became motionless. Beside the mat, the black gold worm was also motionless, abnormally quiet. Only the gold coin mark on the back flashed with a gold light. When he woke up from meditation, Zhua Mo couldn't disguise the ecstasy in his eyes. This Ling vein, compared to the Ling vein in his little yard, was much greater. If the Ling vein in the seclusion room of the little yard could be said to be a small branch, then this Ling veins was like the stem. The abundant Ling energy made one unconsciously comfortable. With such a high-quality Ling vein, he could quickly enter Zhuji. He had decided, in the future, this would be his secluded cultivation room. When Zhua Mo squeezed out of the rock hole, the blinding sun outside made him unconsciously narrow his eyes. Turning and carefully covering up the hole, he scattered the granite that he had dug out into the weeds. Nothing could be seen. After finishing, he released a breath. Just at this time, Li Yingfeng came looking for him with other people. Because there wasn't any buildings in West Wind Valley, if Sua Mo was going to live inside the valley, then it required building a house. She was naturally in charge of this kind of matter and personally came to ask about Sua Mo's preferences and needs. After attentively listening to Sua Mo's demands, she waved her hands and the other outer sect disciples instantly started to move. In half a day, a little yard was built. Sua Mo named it the Little West Wind Yard. The Little West Wind Yard became his new home. Chapter 36 Encounter Again. The Little West Wind Yard became one of the important places in Wukong's sword sect, especially for outer sect disciples. Its importance far surpassed the residences of all other inner sect disciples. The great majority of outer sect disciples farmed, and what they were most afraid of were problems in the Ling fields. Having a Ling plant farmer in the sect, they felt more secure. At least when a problem occurred now, they knew they could find someone. A brand new yard appeared in the valley. The outside walls were constructed from limestone. The fine patterns and the cool hardness of the limestone added a few hints of serenity and peace. The vines were like a waterfall, the stars in the sky occasionally reflecting, glittering and speckled. The pond in the yard wasn't the mud pond in his previous residence. First-grade purple fire lotus were planted in the pond. The purple lotus flowers were like purple flames that were burning in the water. In the night, they would release a hazy purple light. Between the purple fire lotuses, the silver scissor fish swam happily. It was like countless blades crashing together, dozens of silver lines intersecting, blinding to the eye. Sua Mo wasn't in the mood to admire the beautiful scenery. Just like before, he would go to Cold Mist Valley at the same time every day to make rain and take care of the plants. Now that he was an inner sect disciple, the rule that it was not allowed to fly inside the mountain was not valid for him. Putting on the spirit traveling seal, each of his steps was a small flight. His speed wasn't slower than those flying steeds. Other than saving a lot of time, he enjoyed the process very much. These days, during the daytime, he was like normal as he cared for the Ling fields. At night, he would quietly run to the Ling vein in the rock room to meditate and practice embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Even though the primary purpose of embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was to cultivate the spirit, but the increase in Ling energy was also pretty good and much better than 10 principle scripture. Adding on the help of the Ling vein, after a few days, his progress was astounding. Without him detecting it, his cultivation quietly broke through to the 9th level of Lianqi. The Ling vein in the rock room became Sua Mo's biggest secret other than Pu Yao. He was especially careful. In order to disguise the opening, he just didn't use a piece of granite to seal the entrance, he also planted large amounts of weeds and shrubs around the opening. From the outside, there was nothing that could be detected. His only worry was that elders like his master or the sect leader would come here, so he didn't dare to put out any jinji. With his skill, the jinji he would create would be completely ineffective against the sect leader and the other and would arouse their attention instead. His days were extremely leisurely. Other than the provision of jingshi each month, there was also a provision of Ling grains. He had planted Ling grains for 2 years yet had never ate it before. The Ling grains were filled with rich Ling energy. And when it was absorbed, it was extremely gentle, unlike the forceful nature of the Ling energy absorbed from the jingshi, and used if one had to go to some special places like Bloody Heaven Metropolis Jia. 3,000 years ago, Yaomao were defeated. In order to preserve their strength, the last remaining 100 or so great powers of the Yaomao, using their own bodies and blood as the guide, as 7 medium jia as the axis, 49 little jia as the screen to create Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia and stop the Xianxia in their steps. Inside Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, all of the Ling energy became extremely unrefined and unordered. Xianxia basically had no way of absorbing it. Those that traveled to Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, they always needed to bring large amounts of jingshi and Ling grains. Jingshi was used to replenish the normal usage of Ling energy, but due to the fact that the Ling energy in Jingshi was extremely strong, relying only on Jingshi could easily cause the cultivation to collapse. While the Ling energy in the Ling grains were not as potent as it was in Jingshi, but it was gentle and could help Xianxia stabilize their cultivation. The disciples in some large sects would use Ling grains every day to increase the speed of cultivation. But for a small sect like Wukong Sword sect, they would only provide a certain amount each month. And it was only low-grade Ling grains. But even just first-grade Ling grains, Xuemo had never eaten any before. Xuemo was presently studying the jade sticks that Elder Wei Nan had left. Even though Elder Wei Nan's cultivation had been limited, but many of the roads he had walked were worthy for Xuemo to use as reference, such as farming. Elder Wei Nan had been a Ling plant farmer, and had learned how to make dan. How similar was that to Xuemo? Xuemo hadn't thought to touch the obscure scriptures yet. How to earn Jingshi, it was what he needed to think about right now. What was easiest to earn Jingshi within Lianqi? What to plant? Finally getting 20 mu of third-grade Ling fields, Xuemo naturally wanted to organize it well. Right now, he had no money, completely wrung dry by Pu Yao. The allowance from the sect each month wasn't an insignificant amount, but for him, it was just a drop in the bucket. Things like Ling veins couldn't be converted directly to Jingshi. But even if it was possible to sell it, Xuemo definitely wouldn't sell it. To surrender long-term benefits for short-term gains, how would such a shrewd person like him do such a stupid thing? Thinking of ways to earn Jingshi was one of the most important matters of Wei Nan. Actually, for every single Xianxia, Jingshi was a problem that couldn't be avoided. The amount of Jingshi earned directly influenced the speed of cultivation. Talismans, jade sticks, materials. What didn't require Jingshi? Even though Xuemo was now an inner sect disciple and the sect would put effort into nurturing him and give him conveniences in each area, but it was limited. But compared to Xuemo's circumstances, Wei Nan's past circumstances were much more difficult. The paths that he had explored were extremely worth of reference to Xuemo sitting on the gray-beaked goose that the sect had given him. Xuemo took big and small pouches as he sat idly on the goose's back. These things, all of them were what others had given him which he couldn't use. He planned on turning all of it into Jingshi. Even though it really wouldn't be a lot, but right now he had no other way. Hoping that Pu Yao could spit out some Jingshi, that was impossible. Pu Yao always sat with his eyes closed on the gravestone every day. He seemed to be meditating. Did he need to cultivate too? Xuemo was very curious. Right now, he wouldn't actively interact. Pu Yao's mood was fickle, ruthless and crazy. Yet his power was extremely deep. This kind of person, you never knew what his next step would be, you never could guess what he was thinking inside, you also never would know what his true aims were. Xuemo felt that Pu Yao was a true devil. He would give you enticements that made your soul shake, and just when you are enjoying it to the limit, you would fall to the lowest level of hell. The torments Pu Yao gave him, Xuemo had hated, had raged, had felt hopeless. But when Master had said that his features had been changed and his mind erased, these emotions that had troubled him dissipated like smoke. Because he needed power. Because he needed answers. These petty torments, what was it really? He clearly remembered the unfamiliarity he felt when he first woke up 2 years ago. In these 2 years, the voice that appeared in his dreams tormented him countless times. He had been afraid, terrified, hesitant, uncertain. He had thought of trying to find answers but had no clues. There was nothing he could do. So he muddled his way through the days and was never happy. Right now, he was awake. He only had one thought. He needed to find the answer. Who? Who did all this? Unable to be forgiven. On the back of the gray-beaked goose, Xuemo looked at Dong Fu appearing through the clouds. He tightened his fist. Dong Fu was the same as usual, people streaming. Zuomo headed straight for the free market and found Fu Jin. Fu Jing's eyes were extremely sharp. Seeing the spring sprout jade metal on Zuomo's waist, his entire person blanked. After a while, he recovered. Even though shock still remained in his eyes, but he piled a smile on his face. Congratulations little Mo Go, little Mo Go. TSK, such a young Ling plant farmer, little Mo Go is definitely extraordinary. Come in, come in. Zuomo didn't waste pleasantries. With a bang, he threw the large bag at Fu Jin. Sell these things for me. What things? Fu Jin asked as his hands rapidly opened the cloth bag. With just one sweep, he could generally determine the value of these things. There were many items but they weren't valuable. It was actually normal. The Lianqi outer sect disciples, they couldn't give anything valuable. His brain moved rapidly and quoted a generous price, 50 pieces of second-grade jinsha. How about it? Zuomo knew the market. These things definitely wasn't worth 50 pieces of second-grade jinsha. He shook his head, too much, 30 pieces is good. All right. Fu Jin briskly handed over the jinsha and put away the items. With a smile, he said, now that little Mo Go has flourished, don't forget to support this little brother. The two chatted a bit more. Zuomo listened very carefully. Don't estimate the kind of small business people like Fu Jin. Their intuition was extremely sensitive. Any movements in the market couldn't be concealed from their eyes. Between the words, Fu Jin was extremely worries. Recently, the price of the Ling grains was continuously rising. This was the first time it had occurred in the recent years. Each year, people would go to Bloody Sky Metropolis to hunt Yao, but the price of Ling grains had never been as exaggerated as this. Connecting it to the recent rumors about Bloody Sky Metropolis, it made people worried. According to Fu Jin, it wasn't just Tian Yu Jia. The price of Ling grains in all the other Jia were continuously rising. All of this clearly showed that the conflict in Bloody Sky Metropolis was become even more intense. Was the Yaoma starting the counterattack? After hearing Fu Jin's words, Zuomo's heart became slightly heavier. For low-level Xiaoxia, the greatest danger was turmoil. If a great war like the one 3,000 years ago started, low-level Xiaoxia was the cannon fodder that would die the quickest. Ho, it's really a small world, fate lets enemies meet. A strange voice interrupted Zuomo's musing. He raised his head and a headache started. The two people in front of him, one of them was the Dong Qi sword sect disciple whose flying sword had been cracked by him the last time. The person at the side was very unfamiliar. It probably was his Shixiang. His presence was even greater. Fu Jin was extremely perceptive. Seeing the situation, he instantly felt bitter inside but pushed a smile on his face. Sirs, come. Everyone sit down and drink some tea, pa. The voice instantly stopped. Fu Jin was thrown flying like a sandbag. Trash. Is there space for you to talk here? The other took away his hand and said icily. Zuomo hadn't thought the other would start punching right away. He hadn't managed to react in time. He hurriedly ran over to support Fu Jin. Looking at the hand mark on the face and the blood spilling from the corner of Fu Jing's mouth, Zuomo's eyes became dark. He carefully helped Fu Jin up and then slowly turned around. Who was so stupid and let their dog out? Zuomo stared at the one that had moved, his finger caressing the gold sword ring. That guy's face instantly became flushed. In a rage, the voice suddenly stopped. A sword energy, carrying a faint cloud of frost energy, pointed straight at his forehead. Chapter 37, Two Blows. The two Xiaoxia from Dong Qi sword sect clearly hadn't thought that Zuomo dared to move first. Especially the one that had moved first. In his perspective, if Tu Ningmai hadn't suddenly appeared in that previous encounter, Zhuemo would have been easily dealt with. This Lianqi trash, he dared to actively provoke the two. The sword energy almost reached the Dong Qi disciple's forehead, the faint cold energy made him abruptly wake up. He instinctively pushed out his flying sword but suddenly remembered that his flying sword had been ruined by this guy in front of him. He didn't manage to dodge in time and got brushed by the faint mist surrounding the sword energy. Hiss! A bloody wound the width of a finger appeared on his forehead. The Dong Qi disciple managed to steady himself, his eyes full of hatred as he stared viciously at Zhuemo, wanting to cut Zhuemo to pieces. This damned guy in front of him. He was clearly only in the stage of Lianqi, but every time they met, he himself would become extremely sorry. Reaching up to touch the wound on his forehead, he saw the blood on his finger. His viciousness rose and he roared angrily, "You want death? If I don't kill you today," taking advantage of the time he took to speak, Zhuemo sent out another blow. The thin sword energy contained a faint mist as it headed for the other's open mouth. This sword energy was even stronger than the one before, the white mist shrouding it even thicker. If one listened carefully, they could almost hear a stream of tinkling as the icicles crashed. The pupils of the Dong Qi disciple that had been spectating from the side suddenly shrunk. Zhuemo had been clever in his timing to send out the sword energy, the speed even faster than before. The other's flying sword had been ruined by Zhuemo. He had actually come today with his Xixiang to help him pick a new flying sword. He hadn't thought he would meet his enemy. When he detected the sword energy, he suddenly realized that it wasn't just his flying sword that had been ruined, but he didn't have any other defensive talisman on his body. Usually, he amused himself by bullying others and neglected his cultivation. Seeing the sword energy coming near, in his panic, he completely didn't know what to do. Pa! The misty sword energy accurately landed on the other's mouth. The blood instantly flew, two teeth landing on the ground. This string of attacks completely stupefied him. He covered his mouth, looking in disbelief at the two teeth on the ground. Zhuemo kept his guard up. Compared to the excitement of the battle last time, he was extremely calm this time. The only thing he could rely on was the gold sword ring. But the gold sword ring could only store 3 sword energies. Zhuemo only had the last sword energy remaining. It was his last and only attack. If the other was only one person, he would unhesitatingly add it on. But he was very clear that the two people's strength were above him, yet he could not just stand by and see Fu Jin be humiliated because of him. The worst case would be getting beaten up viciously. He already prepared to endure it. He wouldn't release this last sword energy easily. He wanted to make it a vicious one. They won't end well. Zhuemo thought viciously. Ah! The other gave a shocking howl, his features twisted and his eyes sprouting fire. The voice once again stopped abruptly. It seemed that an invisible hand was choking his neck. His entire body slowly rose, leaving the ground. Compared to roaring a second ago, he was now like a fish out of the water, eyes bulging, speaking but unable to make any noise. Zhuemo was astounded, his eyes couldn't help looking towards the side. A young person dressed in white slowly moved in their direction. He didn't even look at the Dong Qi disciple hanging in the air. Dong Fu does not allow fighting, don't you all know? The other Dong Qi disciple furrowed his toes. He suddenly raised a hand. A sword energy shot out of his fingertip, stopped and twisted, like drawing a plum branch. The disciple that had been fighting with Zhuemo landed with a plop, face deep purple and unconscious. Sir, you are too biased. Both sides were fighting yet you only blame one person. It isn't fair. The white-clad youth stared at the other, Dong Qi Zong Mingyan. A little humble name. Didn't think that sir would have heard it. Honored, honored. Zong Mingyan raised his hands in a greeting, his expression still cold. Elder Zhua Mei Tian's disciple, it naturally rings in my ears. The white-clad youth said noncommittally. Zhong Ming Yen raised an eyebrow. Sir, is you by? The white-clad young person gave 2 characters. Oh. Zhong Ming Yen responded faintly, but his voice then turned sharp. So it is the honored disciple of Elder Tian Songzi. However, can brother you tell me, why only punish my sect's disciples? Does brother you discriminate against my Dong Qi disciples? Yu Bai smiled. He pointed with a finger at the jade medal at Suomo's waist. Only now did Zhong Ming Yen notice the spring sprout jade stick at Suomo's waist. He blanked for a second before nodding his head. Ling plant farmer, I understand. Giving a deep look to Suomo, he turned to leave. Yu Bai imperceptibly furrowed his brow. Is Sir not taking your shitty with you? Zhong Ming Yen didn't even turn his head, heading forward, leaving behind a sentence. A piece of trash that can't even win over a Lianqi Ling plant farmer, what's the use? Yu Bai shook his head and didn't speak. He casually sent out a stream of white light that entered the sky. Flying sword messages. Compared to little thousand cranes, flying sword messages were much faster. As expected, in a short while, 2 Xiuzhe flew over and landed, bowing to Yu Bai. Yu Bai pointed to the unconscious Dong Qi disciple on the ground, stating, this person broke the prohibitions of Dong Fu, and is now exiled from Dong Fu. Yes. The 2 bowed to Yu Bai and lifted the person with them as they flew away. If I didn't see it wrong, you are the disciple of Wukong Sword Sect's elder Xian Yen. Yu Bai turned his face and said warmly to Zhuo shook his head, my master is Shifeng Rong. The time that the other 2 had fought had been very short, but no matter if it was Ling energy or the manipulation of spells, they were hundreds of times better than Zhuo. And both of them had vast and intimidating presences. Zhong Ming Yen was cold and sharp, Yu Bai confident and carefree. They were all outstanding. However, Zhuo didn't feel very comfortable. No matter if it was Zhong Ming Yen or Yu Bai, their bodies would unconsciously give an aura of being high up. Zhuo disliked the aura very much. Unconsciously, he didn't want to have deeper relations with Yu Bai. Elder Shifeng Rong. Yu Bai was slightly surprised at this answer. When the 2 had started to fight, he had already noticed. He hadn't detected anything in the first sword energy but had been shocked that a Ling plant farmer could send out a sword energy. When he noticed the gold sword ring on Zhuo's hand did he understand. At that time, he had prepared to wade in. Tian Yu Jie was a classical minor Jie primarily composed of sword cultivators. Xiuzhe like Ling plant famers were a very rare resource. Not just Dong Fu, but in almost all the primary towns of Tian Yu Jie, there were prohibitions that protected production cultivators like Ling plant farmers. But just at that moment, Zhuo sent out the second sword energy. Yu Bai's eyes were very skilled and saw it clearly. The first sword energy only had a little sword energy, not enough to be of significance. But the sword essence in the second sword energy was very similar to Wukong Sword Sect's Ice Dragon Sword, Xian Yan's sword essence. Wukong Sword Sect's sudden rise had attracted everyone's eyes. And as the true ruler of Dongfu, Tian Songzi naturally would pay more attention. Yu Bai was the core disciple of Tian Songzi and he knew much more about Wukong Sword Sect than normal people. The apparition when Wei Xing entered Juji had alerted Tian Songzi. That night, Yu Bai had accompanied his master to investigate. He had personally seen with his own eyes that sword energy that rose into the heavens at Wei Xing's Juji and had never been so shocked. And the scene when Xian Yan's sword had turned into a dragon made his mouth wide and unable to forget. His talents were exceptional and the scope of his eyes far surpassed others in his generation. In the area around Dongfu, the people who could rank with him could be counted on the fingers. But in one night, 2 successive blows, it created a great interest in him to the low-key sect of Wukong Sword Sect. He couldn't help closely examining Zhuo. From the beginning, the expression on Zhuo's face had never changed. Yu Bai didn't mind that. He had met countless unique individuals. Those that had strength always had some unique qualities. What made him shocked was Zhuo Mo's age and cultivation. It wasn't high, but low. It was very hard to estimate the age of cultivators, but a general decision could be made from the eyes, the manner of speech and conduct. The age of the Wukong sword sect disciple definitely wasn't high. Such an age, it was common to see a cultivation of Lianqi. So young, such low cultivation, yet he could comprehend sword essence. This made Yu Bai very surprised. The sword essence carried in the second sword energy had been in a fledgling stage. The white mist surrounding the sword energy easily confused others. That wasn't mist that was caused by the coldness of the sword energy. In reality, it was composed of large numbers of even smaller sword essences. These scattered sword essences were far from complete like Xi and Yan's sword essence, but this Lianqi disciple was able to control them in a certain range. That wasn't easy to do. Yu Bai almost couldn't believe it. He always had been confident in his own talents, but seeing this zombie-like disciple, he felt that he didn't know what to say. When he first comprehended sword essence, he had been in the middle stages of Zhuji. He had sat quietly in his master's sword stove for more than 30 days before he had some understandings. Even more, the jade metal of a Ling plant farmer wasn't easy to get. Yu Bai had grown up in Dongfu and knew very well of the difficulty. Another strong entity had come out of Wukong sword sect. Even if his cultivation right now wasn't high, but his future was limitless. Wukong sword sect, already mysterious in Yu Bai's mind, became even more mysterious. Give my greetings to Elder Shi Feng Rong. Yu Bai warmly gave a bow. Noticing the alertness in Zhuo Mo's eyes, he was a proud person, and his desire to form a relationship instantly faded. Dong Fu might protect Ling plant farmers, but you have to be careful and not have bad relationships with others. Finishing, he raised his hands and floated away. Zhuo Mo's heart instantly landed back. He had already prepared to be injured and hadn't thought he would be safe. Even he found it wondrous. Fu Jin wasn't seriously harmed and firmly refused the jingshe that Zhuo Mo handed over. This crisis changed the relationship between the two. Zhuo Mo didn't like Yu Bai but was very happy to interact with Fu Jin. Everyone was little people. Fu Jin was the local snakehead here. He was clear to what each place was selling. In 2 hours, he managed to help Zhuo Mo buy everything he needed. It was a giant bag of a variety of seeds of Ling herbs and grasses. 30 pieces of jingshe were completely spent by Zhuo Mo taking the things he brought. He bid farewell to Fu Jin and sat on the gray-beaked goose straight back to Wukong Mountain. He had decided that he definitely wouldn't leave the mountain before he entered Zhuji. He was still scared about what happened today. He and Dong Qi sword sect were now at odds. If he encountered Dong Qi disciples again, it wouldn't end well for him. To have such good luck as today every time, that was a dream. Dongfu wasn't some safe place. Chapter 38 Fragrant Ginger Yards. What Mo needed to carefully plan out the 20 mu of Ling fields. He had very little money in his hands and couldn't buy many of the Ling herb seeds. Following the conclusions that Elder Wei Nan had made from his experiences, what he picked were species that had a high-quality price ratio. To guarantee his profits, Zhuo Mo had attentively researched the present market before taking all his bags with him to the mountain. But he couldn't start seeding it immediately. Up until now, he only had experience planting Ling grains. Any kind of Ling plant had different needs and concerns. Thankfully, Elder Wei Nan had detailed descriptions in the jade sticks and he didn't need to experiment for himself. Studying the jade sticks, laboring over, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Other than that, he needed to care for the Ling fields in Cold Mist Valley. He was extremely busy every day, his feet almost not touching the ground. When he had studied pretty much all the jade sticks, he started to prepare the initial work. Luckily, They were all somewhat common Ling herbs and grasses and didn't need anything rare or expensive. Otherwise, he could only just stare at it. I'm very poor, I'm very poor, I'm very poor, humming a tune. Xuemo directed the mud-turning earthworm to plow the Ling fields and seeded out the Ling herbs and grasses he had brought. After a few days, some sprouts had appeared in the 20 mu. The tender greens carried Xuemo's hopes. Xuemo could finally slow down. Even he almost couldn't stand the amount of labor these past days. After planting down all the seeds, the labor required was instantly halved. He finally had the time to cultivate. This was why Sword Xiao never liked cultivating any kind of livelihood spell. Practicing any spell required large amounts of time and energy. For sword cultivators, they only focused on the sword. This was enough for them to have unrivaled attack strength. This was also why, in all the Xiuzhe, in one-on-one, Sword Xiao had the greatest power. Of course, the actual situation would be complicated. There were many factors that could affect the fight between two Xiuzhe. It was all tangled and complicated, like cultivation, talismans, seal formations, scriptures etc. Xuemo didn't need to think about these things. At least, before he entered Juji, he didn't need to consider it. For him, what was most important at present was Juji. After that was the 5 basic 5-element spells. This would directly influences how much he would earn. He gave up 10 principal scripture. To try to rely on that to enter Juji, it was a dream. Embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation became his only choice. He cultivated it as though it was a Ling energy scripture. After Juji, the sect would pass on new scriptures. By then, he would have more choices. This period of time was extremely busy, so busy he forgot the existence of Puyao. It was only now that he suddenly remembered Puyao and decided to take a look in his consciousness. Entering the sea of consciousness, he stared with wide eyes and mouth. Compared to before, the area of his consciousness was several times its previous size. This wasn't surprising to him because his spiritual power had increased greatly. He had already found that whenever his spiritual power increased, the size of his sea of consciousness would increase as well. What shocked him was a river. At some unknown time, a new edition of a river had appeared in his consciousness. A silvery shining river. The surface wasn't broad but it was abnormally straight. It followed the median line of the consciousness and divided the consciousness in two. When Xuemo came near, he was surprised to find that it wasn't water in the river, but countless large and small icicles. The light reflected through the icicles and created the silvery light. And when the countless icicles reflected the light at the same time, the bright light was enough to make the consciousness brighter. They slowly moved up and down like the movement of the tide. Layers of silver light flashed past like a secluded and deeply asleep ice dragon. On the two shores were concentrated red flames. These red flames were like a red water plant that grew beside the rivers. In the sky above his head, that star was even brighter. Neither the roaring flames nor the shining ice river could block its light. In the sea of flames, on the edge of the river, under the star, a gravestone was shrouded in black clouds and Puyao sat silently on it, listening to the sound tablet. Xuemo was completely stunned by the scene. The sea of consciousness was very calm, only the sound of the sound tablet drifting. The dark red flames danced, like the most seductive dancers twisting their waists. The slowly flowing ice river was like a sword, cold and awe-inspiring. The star was mysterious and profound. All of this created an extremely harmonious picture, and gave him a peerless shock. A beat later, Xuemo's mind refocused. He still wasn't clear what the sea of flames and the star was, but this ice river was like the tidal icicle sword essence that he had comprehended. About this point, he was very certain. Because from what he saw, flowing in the river wasn't icicles but countless sword essences. This ice river would have formed exactly in this period of time. He felt that there was some faint connection but no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't catch it. The flames and the star had appeared very early. They must be related to embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. The time that the star appeared was when he had completed one breath. Did it represent one breath? What about the red flames? He wanted to ask Pu Yao, but he also knew that Pu Yao definitely wouldn't answer. Oh, of course, if there was Jingshi, that was a whole different matter. Suemo didn't disturb Pu Yao and left the consciousness. When Suemo disappeared from the consciousness, Pu Yao opened his eye. In his blood-red eye was panic. Even though he was at the 9th level of Lianqi, but there was still a distance before reaching Zhuji. The amount of Ling energy needed for Lianqi 9th level was much greater than the previous levels. Suemo wasn't impatient. With the help of a high-grade Ling vein, if he still couldn't enter Zhuji, he didn't need to cultivate anymore. He could feel that the increase in his Ling energy was very fast. The fire dragon grass had been moved into Suemo's own fields. The sunlight in West Wind Valley was abundant and more suitable to the growth of the fire dragon grass. Just like normal, Suemo stood in front of the fire dragon grass. He cycled his Ling energy, his two hands moving quickly. It was Art of Crimson Flame. After practicing finger movements in the water, the nimbleness of his pair of hands were much stronger than before. The Art of Crimson Flame, with its simpler hand movements, was much easier for him to cast. A thin faint gold light dropped from the sky, passed those Suemo's hands and was guided onto the fire dragon grass. Art of Crimson Flame could concentrate the essence of pure yang. It was very beneficial to plants that were young. Suemo didn't move, appearing like a stone person. The crucial factors of Art of Crimson Flame were endurance and a peaceful mind. This wasn't a problem for Suemo. After receiving the jade medal, he found that he had walked an indirect road. If he had picked Art of Crimson Flame in the beginning, he would have gotten the jade medal earlier. However, there wasn't a deficiency that was for nothing. Since he could do Art of Flora, the most difficult of the 5 spells, the other spells were easily achieved. Time passed little by little. The strand of pale gold light that came from the sky turned slightly darker. A layer of light gold appeared on Suemo's hands as though gold was plated onto them. The leaves of the fire dragon grass became even brighter and fresher, vitality pouring from the entire plant. After persisting for an hour, he finally stopped. His 2 hands moved and that thin gold strand instantly disappeared. He inspected the fire dragon grass and was very satisfied. Art of Crimson Flame was extremely good for young plants. All plants were divided into yin or yang. Suemo also divided his own Ling fields into 2. The parts with more sunlight, he used to plant young plants. The parts that were shadier and had more moisture, he used to grow yin plants. Suemo prepared to cast Art of Earth Energy. Each day, he would cast a variety of spells on these plants. This was a duty that he had to complete every day. He didn't know if it was that he had used it too much, but Art of Crimson Flame and Art of Earth Energy quickly entered the 3rd level without any of the difficulty that came with the breakthroughs of the other 3 spells. Afterwards, he had thought and then understood. Most of the credit had to go to embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. His spirit was much stronger than before. And no matter if it was the calm mind of Art of Crimson Flame, or the communication and perception of Art of Earth Energy, it was all tightly linked to the spirit. Suddenly a purple light landed beside his hand from the sky. A purple flying sword the length of his middle finger suddenly appeared next to his hand. Flying sword message. Suemo turned to look around. Seeing that no one else was around, he then was certain it was for him. He carefully reached for the flying sword. The moment his finger touched the flying sword, a voice sounded inside his mind. Come to Fragrant Ginger Yard at 3. It was his master Shifeng Rong's voice. Suemo's heart calmed down. Previously, he had been tortured to death by that pink paper crane and he had finally received a break. The pitiful Zhuemo, his nerves had become very fragile and suspicious of these kinds of things. These last few days, his master hadn't sought him out. It must have been given him time to get settled. Zhuemo was very excited. Master's proficiency in the area of dan making was very deep, and according to Liang Feng Shiji, the dan that master made, it was always easy to sell. In the previous times that master had spent traveling outside, the income of the sect had been significantly impacted. And according to the experiences of Elder Wei Nan recorded in the Jade Stick, making dan was a faster way to make jingsher than farming. Exactly at 3, Zhuemo arrived at Fragrant Ginger Yard. This was the first time he had come to Fragrant Ginger Yard. Entering the gate, he saw many female disciples at work. Some were drying ling herbs, some were sorting, others had ling energy on their hands as they ground up ling herbs. In this large yard, there were more than 40 female disciples at work. Seeing Zhuemo, all these female disciples all stopped what they were doing. Xixiang. Xixiang. They all bowed in greeting and surreptitiously examined this Xixiang. The news that 4th Shirgu had received a male disciple had spread through Fragrant Ginger Yard very early on. This crowd of female disciples already had a good handle on Zhuemo's background. What made them feel comforted was that Zhuemo had once helped the female disciples at the eastern peak that were responsible for the animals and wasn't one to harass others. Chapter 39, Starting Making Dan. From today onwards, you will learn how to make Dan with me. The job this month is very simple. 5 fasting pills, doesn't matter what grade they are. Give them to me by the end of the month, Shi Feng Rong coldly said. I have prepared 10 portions of ingredients for you. If there isn't enough, buy more yourself. The method to make fasting pills is in the study. You can read all the jade sticks in the study. Those that are over your cultivation, you won't be able to see. Everything is in the room in the west wing. In the future, that would be your Dan making room. Alright, you can go. Finishing, Shi Feng Rong turned and entered her Dan making room. With a bang, the Dan room was shut tightly. Zhuemo dumbly stood. This was called learning Dan making with his master. He turned to look at the surroundings. Empty. Not a single person. Zhuemo grimaced. Why did he only ever encounter these kind of people? It was like this when he learned things from Pu Yao, there were never any explanations. And this master was even more extreme. Not just throwing him to the side, she also stipulated how much he had to make. When Zhuemo went into the study, he stared dumbly. How to find the recipe. In the study, there floated hundreds of jade sticks in different shapes and colors. They were like a group of mischievous children, drifting to and fro in the study. There was an energy whirlpool of various colors around each jade stick. It was these whirlpools that carried the jade sticks in flight. Fasting pill. After musing for a long moment, Zhuemo shouted helplessly. The jade sticks unconcernedly floated about, not responding. That way wasn't right. But there wasn't anything else in the room. Zhuemo scratched hard at his head, he was at his wit's end. Maybe he needed to use his consciousness. After hesitating for a while, he reached out with his consciousness. When his consciousness touched the energy whirlpool around a jade stick, something instantly flooded into his head. Energy Diagrams of Ling Herbs. Authored by Dongming Sanren, I, of Little Link Jia. Includes more than 400 Ling herb energy diagrams. Zhuemo's mind instantly jumped, his consciousness going to touch all the other jade sticks. The information from each jade stick was released inside his mind. Very quickly, he found inside one jade stick the method to make fasting pills. This jade stick had, in total, the recipe for 3 different basic Dan. Fasting pill was the most basic Dan. Its use was very simple, to satisfy hunger. Using it would guarantee a long time without hunger. It counted as a type of useful Dan. His consciousness locked onto this jade stick and the jade stick automatically flew in front of him. Picking up the jade stick, he poured Ling energy in and the recipe to make fasting pills was revealed in his mind. And then, the pitiful Mo could only stare dumbly again. Monarch Pakima leaves, subject yellow stone, 3x3 flowing fire, cauldron energy sinking to bottom, Mo recognized every character. However, if he put the characters together, it was like he was in a thick mist, completely lost. Calm, he had to be calm. Mo furiously told his frantic self. He had always assumed that when he became an inner sect disciple, it meant that his hard days had come to an end and his good days were coming. But now he knew, he was wrong, extremely wrong. He had only jumped from one hole to an even deeper hole. He wanted to cry because he had willingly jumped, tried everything to jump in. He had thought his previous days were hard because no one was there to guide him. But now that he became an inner sect disciple, had a master, what was the difference? After a long moment and then his emotions steadied. He was completely disregarded by his master, Mo's stubbornness came on. Wasn't it just a fasting pill? Wasn't it just making Dan? Wasn't it just not being taught? After half a day's worth of effort, he had read every single jade stick in the room. The total amount was 517 jade sticks. And what he could see were only 21 of them. The 21 jade sticks that he had picked out were all floating in front of him. Fire Cloud Dan chapter, not what he wanted, thrown to one side. Blue Ice Dan chapter, no, thrown to one side. Vaporized Dan chapter, thrown. Only when he saw, basics of making Dan, did Mo's mind become alert. He grabbed it and brought it over. This was what he wanted. As though he was starving, he read, Basics of Making Dan. He quickly became enraptured. The contents inside the jade stick were extremely new to him, a completely new world for him to explore. There weren't any complex contents inside, Basics of Making Dan. Everything was some of the basic fundamentals of making Dan, like the matching of herbs, the usage of the cauldron, how to control the fire etc. etc. When he raised his head, he saw that the sky had darkened. Unknowingly, he had stayed for a number of hours in the study. Exhaling a breath, he stood up and moved his sore neck and legs. His eyes were still slightly dull. He was still thinking. Basics of Making Dan wasn't a high-grade jade stick, but the details of the contents weren't anything that could be brought on the market. Having the experiences of being an outer sect disciple, Mo deeply understood the value in this opportunity. As to whether his master would teach him, it had been thrown to the back of his head. It was like he had found treasure as he repeatedly started to read again. The following days, he spent soaking in knowledge at the study. Any jade stick that he could read, he didn't miss a single one of them. They might be useful in the future. Putting in some effort now, he didn't need to worry in the future. If he converted these jade sticks into Jingxia, it was enough to buy 10 Mo. If there was one day when he was in poverty, he could sell the contents of the jade sticks for Jingxia. In the study, Mo snickered. After memorizing the jade sticks until he was dizzy, Mo finally managed to remember the entire contents of the 21 jade sticks. Only now did he remember the Dan room in the right wing was going to be for him and excitedly ran into the right wing. What was most eye-catching in the room was a copper cauldron in the middle of the room. About 2 people tall, 3 round bellies protruding out, and several mats laid around it. There were a few tables against the wall with things piled up on it. The 10 portions of materials that Master had prepared for him were also there. Mo circled around the Dan-making cauldron, muttering, so stingy. Don't just look at the size of the thing, but in reality, it was only a first-grade cauldron. The most important part of a cauldron was the Li, 2, fire seal formation. Beside the body of the cauldron, there was a yin-yang 8 trigrams plate. pouring Ling energy in that could control the Li fire seal formation. Controlling the fire was the most important step in the process of making Dan. Like the 3x3 of flowing fire. 3x3 meant vertical 3, horizontal 3, and flowing fire was a very special kind of fire. Its main flame would roll along the channels. Xuemo put his hands on the 8 trigrams plate and added Ling energy. As expected, a ball of fire lit up at the bottom of the cauldron. According to the method recorded in Basics of Making Dan, he carefully controlled the Li fire seal formation. The Li fire seal formation in a first-grade cauldron wasn't some high-end thing and only had 6 transformations. Xuemo quickly familiarized himself with the process. As he played around with the flame, Xuemo suddenly felt that the feeling of controlling fire was very similar to him casting Art of Crimson Flame. The 5 basic spells of a Ling plant farmer belonged to the 5 elements and yin-yang. Supposedly, Ling plant farmers believed that all things in the world were either yin or yang and belonged to the 5 elements. Art of Crimson Flame belonged to fire in the 5 basic element spells. Speaking from that perspective, the two were connected. However, while the 5 elements and yin-yang had once been a popular path, but as sword cultivators rose, they gradually became a separate system and most practitioners were roaming cultivators. Whether making Dan had similarities to Ling plant farmers, Xuemo wasn't clear. But, if sword essence could merge with Art of Aged Gold, he wouldn't be surprised at a connection between controlling fire and Art of Crimson Flame. The Art of Crimson Flame that he had brought was very rough. Learning it to the 3rd level was already at the extreme limit. There were no instructions for anything further. What he could study were only the first 3 levels. Closing his eyes, his 2 hands were spread on the 8 trigrams plate on the wall of the cauldron. He carefully experienced the subtle aspects of the Li fire seal formation. After a long time, he didn't have any breakthroughs. He had the feeling that those 2 could be combined together, but no matter how he changed it, there was no reaction. With no other solution, he temporarily put the thought to the side. In the area of Dan making, he was the greenest of the green. It was too early to start discussing inventions. He should obediently make the fasting pills. Otherwise, if he couldn't give out 5 at the end of the month, he didn't know how his cold-faced master would punish him. The method for making fasting pills, he remembered it, but what he was lacking was actual experience. There were 10 portions of materials piled on the table. They had all been treated. One of the jobs of the female disciples in the yard was to simply treat all kinds of medicines. Fasting pills were the most basic Dan and naturally didn't have very complicated preparations. Carefully putting each type of material in the cauldron according to the ratio, Xuemo sat down facing the cauldron. He sorted out his mind, his 2 hands on the 8 trigrams, and sent Ling energy in. A light red light came out of the bottom of the cauldron. Xuemo carefully and nervously manipulated the Ling energy. 2 hours passed. A fine layer of sweat appeared on Xuemo's forehead. He felt it was becoming difficult. It was extremely laborious to continuously input in Ling energy steadily for a long time. Damn it! 2 hours had passed but the ingredients had just seemed to start combining together. Based on the progress, if it didn't take a few hours, he guessed it was hopeless. Thinking that he had to continue to maintain this level of Ling energy for long hours, Xuemo felt that it was going to be trouble. After another 2 hours, sweat poured down his back. Suddenly, his Ling energy became unstable. Poof! A black wisp of smoke came out of the cauldron. A burnt smell filled the room. Huff, huff, huff. Having no time to be angry, Xuemo took back his Ling energy and sat on the floor as he panted. His entire body was soaked in sweat. One factor was exhaustion from long-term Ling energy output, another was that he was very close to the cauldron. The fire inside the cauldron cooked him like a cooked shrimp, body completely red. He didn't immediately start making Dan a second time. He struggled up and climbed onto the gray-beaked goose to return to West Wind Valley. It was lucky that he was an inner sect disciple and could ride a steed inside the mountain. He hadn't felt it a moment ago, but lying on the back of the gray-beaked goose, he felt weak all over, not willing to raise even a finger. He had never felt such deep exhaustion like today. Fighting was gathering up all the strength in the body at one and making Dan was like spinning silk from cocoons. Bit by bit, until it wrung out the last bit of Ling energy from the body. Even if his Ling energy wasn't weak now, but facing such intense Ling energy output, he couldn't bear it. And if he was the slightest bit inattentiveness, all the effort before were completely ruined. Suemo sighed in grief inside. From his perspective, as expected, any method that easily earned Jingshi, none of them were simple. Jingshi wasn't easy to earn. Title for a roaming show. One of the 8 trigrams, Li represents fire. Chapter 48. On top of the mat inside the stone room, Suemo serenely mediated, motionless. Through the 24th point of the governing, the 17th point of the conception and the 1st point of the kidney vessels, thick Ling energy entered his body. It especially entered from the governing vessel point. When the Ling energy entered, it had a slightly cool feeling, extremely pleasant. After Suemo had completed one breath, his breathing through the mouth and nose was much less important. Right now, he had only opened 3 points. If he could reach 10 breaths, not only just all 361 points would be opened, all the pores in his body would be unblocked and he would breathe with the world. Of course, for him at the moment, that was very far away. His consciousness had increased, but up until now, he hadn't found any uses for spiritual power. What he needed now was Ling energy, continuous accumulating Ling energy in hopes of entering Zhuji soon. When he woke up from the mediation, Suemo's breath shot out like an arrow. How was Xixiang doing in the sword cave? The thought popped suddenly into Suemo's mind. In reality, he was very envious about the road that Xixiang had picked. It only needed to pay attention to one matter. However, he was clear enough to realize that Xixiang's road wasn't suited for him. So he might be envious, but he would keep doing what he needed to do. He always felt that he didn't have too much talent in the area of the sword. If it wasn't for Pu Yao's existence, not just getting a sword essence, but it was impossible to do what Xixiang was doing. His talents laid in the 5 elements. Other than Art of Aged Gold, which had been helped by Pu Yao, he had learned the other 4 spells on his own. So he was more enthusiastic about 5 element spells. Sometimes he would think, had he once been a roaming shio before? Only roaming shio liked 5 element spells. However, even if he had been a roaming shio, he must have been a silent and unknown shio living in the lowest classes. But if that was the case, why was his appearance changed and mind erased? He unconsciously tightened his fist. Carefully retreating out of the stone cavern, he walked to the opening. The sunlight outside made his eyes squint. The warm sunlight made Suemo's mood unintentionally better. Walking to the Ling fields and seeing the vigorous Ling herbs, his mood became even better. A Ling plant farmer was the profession that was the easiest at showing the relationship between work and result. When you paid in effort and worked hard, the joy at the bountiful harvest made life seem full of hope. Even Old Black, who had a harsh life, smiled when it was harvest time. Suemo calculated the time in his mind. The new cycle of Ling grains should be starting soon. His previous yard had been yielded to Old Black. Old Black had been yearning for that 5 mu of Ling fields for a long time. If it hadn't been for Old Black, he wouldn't have been introduced to Wei Xiang. With that connection there, his friendship with Old Black was naturally different. With nothing to do, Suemo thought to go see him. However, he didn't find anyone at the yard. Suemo guessed that Old Black had gone to the Ling fields and headed to the fields. As expected, he found Old Black in the fields. Also there was Guo Lu. However, the former Guolu Shixiang was now the present Guolu Shidi. That made him slightly unaccustomed. No matter the age or cultivation, outer sect disciples had to call inner sect disciples Shixiang or Shiji. This was the same in every sect. Old Black saw Zui Mo and made a happy expression, little Mo Gu. It seemed that Guolu's illness had healed. He wasn't familiar with Zui Mo and reservedly gave a bow, Zui Shixiang. Zui Mo felt extremely awkward being called Shixiang by two people whose ages far surpassed him. Thankfully, his face was frozen and nothing could be detected. Old Black's Ling grains are really well grown. Zui Mo scanned the Ling fields and couldn't resist praising it. He calmly started a spell, instantly a ball of clouds floated over and the silver strands poured down continuously. Old Black instantly revealed a happy expression. Admiration appeared on Guolu's face. The fourth level of Little Art of Cloud and Rain, people rarely reached it. Guolu had been recovering on the sickbed in the previous months, but the big events that happened in the sect, he had heard them from Old Black. In 1 year, 3 outer sect disciples became inner sect disciples. The sect had never been so flourishing. All the outer sect disciples were greatly encouraged and many of them became even more hard-working. Guolu attentively examined this young Shixiang. Little Zui Mo Shixiang was the inner sect disciple with the lowest cultivation in the sect, a Yanqi disciple that hadn't entered Juji. But the genius of the little Shixiang had passed on. To be able to receive a spring sprout jade metal in Lianqi, Guolu had never heard of it. His best was, Art of Aged Gold. He had worked hard these years but never could break through to the 3rd level. Looking at the little Shixiang who had already become a Ling plant farmer, his heart couldn't help moving. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but be envious of Old Black. No matter if it was Wei Xing Shixiang, or Zui Mo Shixiang, they all had good relationships with Old Black. The waters rose and the boat became high. Old Black was now extremely popular in the outer sect disciples. But Old Black was very down to earth and still planted his Ling grains. Because Guolu had been wounded last time when he had helped Old Black, and Old Black had taken care of him in the recovery, the two had a great relationship. This is 2 mud-turning earthworms. It doesn't have a great use, but it is useful in plowing fields. Zui Mo handed both of them each a small bamboo tube. Sealed inside each tube was a mud-turning earthworm. He hadn't thought that Guolu would be present, but he had enough mud-turning earthworms. The two hurriedly gave their thanks. Guolu saw Zui Mo moving to leave and after struggling and hesitating for a second, he couldn't resist speaking and at the very end, little Shixiang, my Art of Aged Gold, has been stuck at the 2nd level. Please, Shixiang, give some advice. Guoluo would be deeply grateful. Zui Mo was astounded but still stopped in his footsteps. He was respectful of this old farmer like Shixiang who had stood up last time. Right now, his income didn't depend on things like making rain, so the two naturally didn't have any conflicts in interest. Quite the opposite. If Guolu could break into the 3rd level of Art of Aged Gold, he could take on much of the pest problems in the sect for him. Thinking through all the possibilities, he decided to help Guolu. Killing worms is still killing. Gold's main purpose is to kill. This, Art of Aged Gold, belongs to the path of killing. How to kill? There are countless ways in this area. Adding on aged gold energy can transform in many ways. If other methods of killing could be added in, the matter is half solved already. Guolu listened attentively, afraid of losing even a word. When Zui Mo finished, he was pinned to his spot, face deep in thought. Seeing the situation, Zui Mo floated away. Leaving behind the Ling fields, he headed for the eastern peak. The recent changes made him felt that it was a different lifetime. The female disciples of the eastern peak had meant to rely on him, but who would have thought he would become an inner sect disciple? Usually, he wouldn't be able to care for them anymore. But since he received benefits from them, that the black gold worm had been their present, Mo decided to help them. When Xiaogua saw Mo, a surprised expression came onto her round apple face. She timidly said, "Xixiang." The gold-horned copper cow was still leisurely eating ling grass, not paying any attention to Mo felt slightly helpless towards this little girl, especially the always timid expression on her face. Last time when he had fainted, the little girl had been afraid but still persisted in protecting him. When he had heard of this from the others, he was very moved and felt that he owed her a favor. "What? Unhappy to see me?" Mo decided to tease the little girl. His face didn't have any expression in the first place. Adding on a slightly stern tone, it was quite frightening. Xiaogua instantly was frightened, her small head furiously shaking, mist rising in her large yes, her mouth hurriedly explaining, "No, no." Mo instantly realized if he continued, she would really cry. He instantly regretted his action. Wasn't this making trouble for himself? He hurriedly relaxed his tone, "All right. Coming this time, there's something to give to you." The mist in Xiaogua's eyes instantly stopped. She looked in puzzlement at Mo and asked timidly, "What thing?" "Xixiang. This is some sword scriptures, you take it and practice and can pass it on to your other Shiji and Shimi." He handed 2 jade sticks over to the little girl. One of the sticks stored some basic sword moves that he had picked out from the jade stick that Wei Xixiang had given him. At the same time, he took off the gold sword ring from his hand and handed that as well to her. "This is gold sword ring. It can store 3 sword energies. But you first need to learn a gold spell. And, one of the jade sticks has 5 element spells inside. After practicing the art of aged gold, for a while, you can use this talisman." After explaining all this, Mo released a breath. This muddle-headed little girl always made his head hurt. The gold sword ring was not of great use to him now. And he had decided that before Zhuji, he definitely wouldn't leave the mountain. After Zhuji, if Master didn't give a flying sword, he could use ice crystal sword. The power would be much greater than gold sword ring. And that jade stick that contained the 5 element spells wasn't useful for him anymore. He hadn't thought of giving Xiaogua that jade stick at first, but if she didn't cultivate a gold-attributed spell, it wasn't possible to use the gold sword ring. As though the simple sword moves in Wei Xixiang's jade stick. They were simple but useful. For Lianqi disciples, they were a pretty good method of protection. Female disciples, especially weaker outer sect female disciples, their circumstances would be harder than male disciples. Mo could not spare the attention to take care of them like before, and decided to pass these things on to them. In this case, if they met some Xiuzhe who wasn't too powerful, it wasn't as though they couldn't even counterattack. If they met a strong one, he had no solution neither. Luckily, the Dong Qi sword sect disciple from last time had been expelled from Dong Fu. He didn't need to worry about encountering that guy nearby. After handing over everything, Mo flipped up and landed onto the gray-beaked goose's back. He waved his hand at Xiaogua without turning his head back and floated off. Looking at the disappearing Mo, Xiaogua's hands as they held the gold sword ring and the jade sticks unconsciously tightened. Finishing all this, Mo felt that his body was much more relaxed and headed straight for fragrant ginger yard. He still needed to present 5 fasting pills at the end of the month. He didn't dare to offend his cold-faced master. If he didn't complete it, he would certain receive punishment. Entering the Dan room, he didn't start moving immediately. The materials were limited. If he really ruined all of the materials, in his penniless state, there was no place for him to buy more. In theory, with his present cultivation, making fasting pills shouldn't be hard. It really was the most basic Dan. Thinking for a long time, he felt that last time it was that he hadn't controlled the input of Ling energy properly and wasted a lot of Ling energy, causing his Ling energy to not be enough. After thinking for a long time repeatedly and entering mediation, he let the Ling energy recover to the best state. Then he started his second try. Chapter 41, Spiritual Power Bang. The smell of burnt materials once again rose out of the cauldron, spreading through the room. Xuemo gasped heavily, sweat running down his face like a stream. The second try was still a failure. This time, he had continued for 6 hours, but still failed. Opening the cauldron and looking at the black remnants inside, Xuemo's mood was terrible. He was as tired as a dead dog right now and could only stare. He had always thought dan-making was a technical job, not a strength job. If even the fasting pills were this hard, then those high-grade dan, wouldn't he kill himself in the process? He had a deeper understanding in the second try than the first. His previous deductions were not wrong. He was still too new to dan-making. In the process of adding Ling energy, he would waste too much Ling energy. If his cultivation was at Juji, this fasting pill wouldn't be hard. There would be plenty of excess Ling energy to waste, but to a Lianqi 9th level, just the slightest mistake and the Ling energy wouldn't be enough. According to the method on the jade stick, the entire process only needed 10 hours. That meant that he had to make it through 10 hours at minimum. The difference between that and the present 6 hours was very large. Even though there was the Ling vein in the stone room, but increases in Ling energy was a slow process. It seemed he could only try to work on controlling Ling energy. After a while, Xuemo's breaths gradually steadied and his mind returned to clarity. He thought carefully. He wasn't weak in the area of controlling Ling energy. Little Art of Cloud and Rain required a strong control of Ling energy. Even though he had strangely made his way onto the 4th level, but in the matter of controlling Ling energy, theoretically it shouldn't be a big problem. Mulling over it, Xuemo felt that he was still too unfamiliar with dan-making. If he had to familiarize himself, then how much material would that take? The 10 portions that he had, he didn't even know if it could last him until he was familiar. He most likely wouldn't be able to fulfill the quota of 5 fasting pills by the end of the month. Supposedly, when the heads took on new subordinates, they would always make a show of strength at the first interaction. Oh, was this the show of strength of his cold-faced master? He thought humorously. Returning to the little West Wind yard, he wasn't in the mood to eat. After meditation and recovering Ling energy, he climbed onto the roof and continued to ponder the intricacies of dan-making. The moonlight flowed down like the water, gently illuminating the mountain valley. Beside Xuemo, the gray-beaked goose silently stood on the roof. Beside Xuemo's feet, the black gold worm climbed around. After reaching the 4th grade, its intelligence had greatly increased and it constantly followed Xuemo around. Suddenly, Xuemo felt something was flying close. He couldn't help raising his head and looked at the mouth of the valley. A pink little thousand crane spiraled down in the night. Xuemo instantly recovered from his shock at the top of the roof. He felt his skin prickle. Dan-making was tossed far away. There was only one thought in his mind. Damn it, why did this cursed woman come again? Just like last time, the pink paper crane elegantly unfolded in front of Xuemo. Yi, have you missed me? He, I've missed ye. Looking at the paper floating in front of him, Xuemo had a strong impulse to kick it down Wukong Mountain. Calm, he needed to be calm. Suppressing the devious impulse inside, Xuemo spat out a stream of malicious swears in discontent. Damned woman. You won't die well. You're just bored and have nothing to do. You mental case, swearing for 10 minutes, Xuemo swore so much his throat was dry. The irritation in his heart decreased slightly. Looking at the pink paper that was still floating in place before him, Xuemo, who had a moment ago been full of righteous indignation, instantly became dejected. In helplessness, he grabbed the pink paper and jumped down off the roof. Finding a weasel bristle brush, he dipped it in cinnabar. What is it? After throwing the brush to one side, Xuemo messily folded the paper into a crane and threw it out the window. Even though he got rid of the crane, Xuemo still felt depressed. He really had no solution against the owner of the paper crane. He had never thought someone would be bored to such a degree. This bored crazy woman. But her power was much stronger than him. Just any discomfort and the other would straightforwardly use brute force to suppress it. When GE becomes strong, see how GE will sort you out. Xuemo bared his teeth. Very quickly, another pink paper crane flew over. Don't be like this to me. I'm very hurt. Yi, what have you been doing recently? What a waste of words. Xuemo crisply made an evaluation but still grudgingly picked up the brush. Making Dan. West Wind Valley, the paper cranes flew in and out. Ah, Dan making. That's fun. I've never played it before. I only know how to fold paper cranes. You only know how to fold cranes. When Xuemo saw the words, his face instantly became black. He wrote back with the brush, wrong, you also can draw flame exploding seals. Hee, I'm really not that good at flame exploding seals. What I'm best at is a 36 chain flame exploding seal. Threats, menace. This definitely was a threat. Xuemo's fist cracked as it tightened. From his teeth, he forced out, "Gu will endure." The reality was cruel. Under the threat of the other's 36-chain flame exploding seal, Xuemo could only swallow his anger and keep writing. Have to be a lady. A female, fighting and killing isn't good. But I'm very much a lady. I just like watching fireworks. My goal is 108 chain. Fireworks. Xuemo felt depressed. His fragile spirit was viciously struck again. The whole night, Xuemo basically had no time to think about Dan making. The pink paper cranes were like a relentless nightmare, forcing Xuemo to keep writing. Only when the sky lightened was he, under the others, I'm going to be freed. Xuemo had been tormented to crippleness. He felt that it was even more tiring to reply to letters the whole night than making Dan the whole night. Bending to scoop some cold water, he washed his face. Then he came to the Ling fields. Different compared to the other spells, making rain was almost required every day. In a state of muddle-headedness, he casted, Little Art of Cloud and Rain. The sounds of water falling started. His mind was floating far away. Little Art of Cloud and Rain was his most familiar spell. Even if he closed his eyes, he could still cast it. The Ling energy gathered at both of his hands. There was a connection between the ball of clouds and his two hands. The rain was very steady and continuous. He instinctively adjusted the Ling energy. He was too familiar with the spell. He didn't need to add Ling energy at every single spot. Wait. Xuemo was startled out of his daze. He realized he had a very important discovery. He didn't need to add Ling energy to every location. He indistinctly felt that he found the crucial point and didn't dare to ignore it. He hurried and continued to think. Little Art of Cloud and Rain was his most skilled and most familiar spell. He was extremely familiar with every segment. He thought carefully. From starting with the finger motions of Little Art of Cloud and Rain, to concentrating the clouds, to the fall of rain, the amount of Ling energy for each step was different. Some parts, like the rain falling, it almost didn't need any Ling energy at all, just guidance. As he thought even further, Xuemo became excited, his drowsiness fading. If the process of Dan making was like casting a spell, then it should also have places that wouldn't consume Ling energy. As he mused to himself, Xuemo felt that it was very rational and also felt that his actions of putting in a continuous flow of Ling energy was very stupid. Understanding the direction, then the next step was to find where in the process needed Ling energy, and what times could Ling energy be saved. This question sent him back into deep thought. He was very familiar with little art of cloud and rain, so he could find what places needed or didn't need Ling energy. However, he was unfamiliar with dan making. To find the ways to save up Ling energy, he needed to become familiar with the entire process. Yet to familiarizing himself with the entire process, that meant using up large amounts of materials. Unfortunately, he didn't have any jingsher left. The stone-faced Sui Mo grimaced inside. The question was once again difficult. Was the only way increasing Ling energy? That wasn't realistic. Embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was only a scripture for increasing spiritual power. Suddenly, his heart jumped. Spiritual power, maybe he could try with spiritual power. As his mind increased in strength, his greatest change was becoming much more sensitive to everything in the surroundings. Like some of the high-level Jinji. Before, when he passed them, he wouldn't feel anything. But now he could detect the strong killing intent and danger embodied in them. How to use his consciousness was a question he had been puzzled by. Other than art of aged gold, he had no knowledge of how to use his consciousness. What, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, cultivated was the spirit. The increase in the Ling energy was just a side effect. After he cultivated, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, the increase in his spirit far surpassed his progress in Ling energy. Maybe he should think about how to use the consciousness. Sui Mo felt that this might be the breakthrough point. Sui Mo spent the whole day casting the 5 spells in the Ling fields. But today, he didn't focus on casting the spells, but rather on using the consciousness to detect the entire process of casting. This method was extremely effective. Sui Mo was pleasantly surprised by his results. Each step, the change in flow of Ling energy each time, under the scan of the consciousness, it became clear as it never had been before. He could even feel the hair-thin Ling energy flowing. It seemed that he had a treasure mountain but didn't know. Sui Mo was irritated. If he had known earlier to use the consciousness, his spells might have entered the 3rd level much earlier. The soul was peaceful, untainted, and serene. Under the guidance of his consciousness, he focused on making slight changes to each spell. He didn't let go of any change in the Ling energy. How to increase the effect, how to save on Ling energy, how to make it flow. He was like a stone mason, slowly performing changes on his work, slowly experimenting. He didn't know that in his sea of consciousness, the star became brighter than it had ever been, standing out in the darkness. The dancing red sea of flames was strangely quiet and motionless. Only the ice river was slowly flowing, unaffected. On the gravestone shrouded in black clouds, Pu Yao raised his head. The corner of his mouth rose, cold like a blade. This is the person you chose. Looking at it now, your eyes are still this crappy. He closed his blood eye again, entering meditation. Chapter 42 Dan completed. Sui Mo held the fasting pill in front of him, his eyes filled with joy. This was his 4th try and he finally succeeded. The fasting pill was the size of a longan fruit, its color was an attractive blue-green, with a delicate fragrance being emitted. Just a look make one unable to resist wanting to eat it. Fasting pills were mostly prepared for those cultivators who were in seclusion and who had the money. He didn't immediately start making a second one. The success of this fasting pill meant that his direction was correct. With that in the front, what he needed to think about now was the success rate. There were only 6 portions of ingredients left. At the very least, he needed to make 4 fasting pills. In other words, he could only fail 2 more times. In reality, on the 3rd try, he had almost succeeded. However, he slipped up at a small place and everything failed. His consciousness could help him detect the changes of the herbs inside the cauldron and he could accordingly adjust his Ling energy. Spiritual power was really a good thing. Sui Mo thought blissfully. Other than dan making, after he swept over the other spells with his consciousness and made adjustments, not only did his consumption of Ling energy go down, the effects also greatly improved. He did have a few fractions of self-awareness. Even though spiritual power was amazing, but his own experience and knowledge was extremely limited. Even with the help of his spiritual power, the changes he could make were limited. But even those minor changes were very effective. He mused that he should go to the records of the sect to take a look and see if he could find any jade sticks about this area. He was an inner sect disciple now, it would be dumb if he didn't seek out some benefits for himself. Ending up with a cold-faced master who couldn't be relied upon. It was more realistic to rely on himself. Sword cultivators might prioritize Ling energy and not spiritual power, but Sui Mo believed what Wukong's sword sect had accumulated over the years definitely surpassed his aimless fumbles. Of course, that was for the future. Right now, he had many things to work on. Other than dan making, taking care of the Ling fields was also an important job. Even more, for him who had no money at the moment, earning Jingxia was the question he must consider at the present. It had been a while since those Ling grass and herbs had been planted. Some were nearing the harvest time. How to sell them off was also a headache for him. Before he entered Juji, he didn't want to go outside the gates of the mountain. Suddenly remembering Master had said if he didn't have enough materials, he had to use his own Jingxia to buy, did that mean that the sect's materials could be brought? Then did that mean he could sell them? Suemo walked out of his dan room. In the yard, a crowd of female disciples worked hard at preparing all kinds of herbs. Scanning around, Suemo's gaze landed on a female disciple. He remembered clearly that the first day he arrived, she was the first to greet him. She seemed to be quite authoritative among this group of female disciples. She was dressed in cotton cloth and an apron, no makeup on, sweat beading her forehead. This shimmy, Suemo went to greet her. Even though his age was most likely smaller than the other, but due to the rules of the sect, he didn't dare to overstep. She saw Suemo and hurriedly stood, Sui Xixiang. I've just gotten here and do not know many of the rules in the yard. Master is focused on making dan, so I can only trouble shimmy. Suemo said warmly. But it was a pity that his face was frozen and it looked slightly frightening. After the initial panic, the female disciples quickly calmed down and said, Xixiang is too polite. What is Xixiang's question? Suemo asked her his question. This female disciple brushed away the hair in front of her head and smiled, Xixiang might not know but all the herbs in this yard belong to the sect. Other than a certain amount that can be withdrawn, all others need people to pay with Jingxia. But the price is 2/10 lower than the market price. Xixiang is a Ling plant farmer. If you have Ling plants and grasses, you can sell them to this yard. The purchase price of normal herbs are about 2/10 lower than the market price, but other than Jingxia, Xixiang will receive contribution points to exchange for scriptures and other things. If it is rare and valuable Ling herbs and grasses, our sect's purchase price is the same as the market. In the future when Xixiang becomes accomplished at dan making, the sect can help sell the dan that Xixiang makes. Our sect's Yan Lushu is skilled at business and usually can sell them for a good price. He only takes 2/10 as a commission. But like before, other than Jingxia, Xixiang can receive contribution points. Finishing, she handed Suemo a jade stick. The price of Ling grasses and herbs will change each month. Yan Lushu will order someone to make it into a jade stick. This is the inventory list of the prices for this month of Ling herbs. Suemo took it and gave his thanks. Xixiang doesn't have to be too polite. Shimmy is Su Qing and the first seed of this yard's outer sect disciples. In the future, Xixiang, please take care of me. If Xixiang has any questions, come find me. You can also find me if you need to purchase any materials. Su Qing said respectfully. Thanks, Shimmy. Suemo said gratefully. Taking the list, Suemo went back to the dan room and studied the list. He calculated and found the cost of the raw materials for the fasting pill was about 3 pieces of second-grade jingsha, and its price was only half a second-grade jingsha over the cost of the materials. If the success rate was accounted for, there was basically no profit. As expected, it was basically impossible to rely on low-level Dan to make money. It really was just practice. But that was normal. If fasting pills were really that profitable, then countless people would be breaking their heads for a chance to learn how to make Dan. In the following days, Mo continued to make fasting pills. In the process, he had failed once, but as he became more familiar, it took a lot less effort. 10 portions of materials, it made 6 fasting pills. This kind of result could only be called just passable. There was nothing that was worth being proud of. Other than leaving behind the 5 pills, the last one he sold to Su Qing and received 3 pieces of second-grade jingsha. Adding on that he would have an allowance of 20 pieces of second-grade jingsha, he finally wasn't penniless. In the Ling fields of West Wind Valley, Mo carefully examined each stalk of Ling herbs and grass. In the jade sticks of Elder Wei Nan, there had been detailed introductions of these herbs and the methods of cultivating them that he had found. Like snowy foxtail grass, it was snowy white and soft, named for its foxtail-like shape. Its biggest use was to make a famous kind of paper, snowy fox paper. Snowy fox paper was soft and pure white, extremely well suited for making paper seals. Paper was a kind of widespread material. Other than all kinds of paper cranes, it was an essential ingredient in making seal curses and seal soldiers. But the cultivation of snowy foxtail grass wasn't easy as its growth was slow. Especially for snowy foxtail grass which was above 3rd grade. The price was never low. Only 3rd grade snowy foxtail grass could be used to manufacture 4th grade snowy fox paper. Elder Wei Nan had discovered a method for cultivating snowy foxtail grass. The most effective way was to plant it with butterfly grass. Butterfly grass was an extremely common kind of Ling grass. Only the most docile and hardy Ling beasts would eat it. Basically, no one would plant it. But if butterfly grass and snowy foxtail grass were planted together, the growth speed of snowy foxtail grass would increase, and the blue-purple butterfly grass would become a rare sky blue. This sky blue butterfly grass was deeply favored by all kinds of Ling beasts, especially high-grade Ling beasts. The price wasn't low. Many times, Mo couldn't help but be in awe of Elder Wei Nan who he had never met. In Elder Wei Nan's jade sticks, there wasn't any profound scriptures, but useful techniques like this one were countless. Like the method of growing butterfly grass and snowy foxtail grass together, he felt that even the most experienced and powerful Ling plant farmers wouldn't have thought of it. Maybe, it was because Elder Wei Nan didn't have very high cultivation so he would spend so much effort studying those things. Every day, Mo would cast the spells of a Ling plant farmer on the plants in the Ling fields. The amount of work was much greater than he had imagined but he had endured. Over time, he had gotten used to it. He kept on cultivating, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, each day in the rock room. In the past, he hadn't known the many uses of spiritual energy and had more or less been inattentive. Now that he had seen the effects, he was much more focused. In a reversal of the past, he actually was not in a hurry to enter Zhuji anymore. His spiritual power was much stronger than before but there was a lot of room for him to improve. With the help of the Ling vein, the progress of the Ling energy in his body was faster than his estimations. Zhuji wasn't far away, he had a premonition. Dongfu Hall. Dongfu Hall was the residence of the master of Dongfu. It had been constructed for Dongfu Xianren and had been used since then. It took up the biggest secret paradise in Dongfu and it was Dongfu's one true secret paradise. The so-called secret paradises that were sold on the market were only places with slightly more abundant Ling energy and couldn't be really considered a secret paradise. Yu Bai slowly woke up from his meditation, satisfaction gleaming in his warm eyes. The density of Ling energy in Dong Fu Hall was multiple times what it was outside. The fact that he could become the leader of the younger generation of Dong Fu was in large part due to this point. The effects of his daily meditation was 2 or 3 times what other people had. After accumulating over the years, this kind of advantage would increasingly become greater. Master. Seeing Master, he hurriedly stood. How have you been feeling recently? Tian Song Zi asked as he smiled harmoniously. Tian Song Zi was wearing the robes of a Taoist, a knot on his head, extremely carefree. Relatively stable, but still far from becoming Jin Dan. No hurry, no hurry. Tian Song Zi waved his hand, you are still young, don't rush. Becoming Jin Dan is a process. Did you hear the news about the sword test conference? Yu Bai paused, does Master want this disciple to attend the sword test conference? Even though he had a shining reputation in Dong Fu, but he really didn't much confidence in attending the sword test conference, which was a large-scale completion for the entire Kunlun Jing. And from what he had seen, Master never really cared about worldly rewards, so why would he suddenly become interested in the sword test conference? Tian Song Zi smiled, answering, wait for me to finish. The internal happenings of the sword test conference are layered, but we don't have to touch that dirty water. His expression became severe, his gaze worried, and said solemnly, I received news that 2/3 of Bloody Sky Metropolis has already landed in the hands of Yamo. Ah! Yu Bai paled in shock, how could that be so? Yamo are starting to recover their strength. Tian Song Zi sighed, 3,000 years have passed. Yamo recuperated and have adapted. Would they be satisfied being suppressed? Yu Bai's expression was incomparably bad. He knew what this meant. The situation in the future is hard to predict. My Dong Fu needs to prepare early. Tian Song Zi said heavily, I will host a Dong Fu sword test conference in hopes of finding some potential talents. When the nest is being attacked, will there be unharmed eggs? I will tell the other sections. Right now, it has to be a united front in order to fight for a chance at survival. Yu Bai was silent. A beat later, he said, I'm afraid Master will put in the effort but not be thanked. Do within the limits, and depend on the heavens. Tian Song Zi sighed and waved his hand, go and create a list of youths that should be taken note of. Yes. Yu Bai bowed and retreated with a worried expression. You're tuning into the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.